I've built and scaled my online marketing agency and consulting business to multiple millions per year. However, I would not have been able to do that if it wasn't for my team. And so this video is going to be a 3.5-hour breakdown of exactly step-by-step how I've hired 27 of the smartest people in my industry to help me build a multi-million-dollar business in only 3 years. I show you exactly how and where to find A players, how I interview them and the exact questions that I ask them in which order to help me identify the best of the best talent inside of only one 60-minute meeting. I also show you my exact onboarding process to make sure that I actually set up each new hire for success. And finally, I show you how to make this entire talent acquisition system scalable. So I hope you enjoy, and if you do, please like and subscribe.
All right, so welcome to this new week here, which is company-wide recruitment. Now, this framework, the following videos that you're going to be going through, this is going to be how you can hire anyone on your team. The reason why I call it company-wide is because you want to apply what I'm about to go through in the next couple of trainings here to any position company-wide. Doesn't matter what it is, setters, closers, even VAs to a certain extent, account managers, operations people, C-suite level staff. If you want to hire outside, which I personally don't recommend, we can get into that. But essentially, this is what the playbook that you want to follow to, as we'll get into, I'm kind of giving it away here, but one of the things you want to optimize for as you scale past sort of 250K a month or so is generating scalable talent acquisition. So initially, in the early days of building any company, always the goal is, how do we get clients at scale? How do we get new clients coming to us every single month? What you'll soon realize is that once you reach about 250 to 300 is when I really started to feel this. You might feel it a little earlier, a little later, depending on your current team, etc. But what you'll really start to then realize is you'll switch from asking the question of how do we get clients to come to us at scale, because you'll have that dialed in by that point. What you'll start to ask yourself is, how do we have new talent, high level talent coming to us at scale? How do we find this talent at scale? And then also, which will be the following weeks, how do we then ramp that talent to KPI in the quickest time frame possible? Because what will become your constraint is not client acquisition, because guess what? On client acquisition, we can always just spend more. If you want to sign more clients, we just spend more. What will become your constraint, again, at scale, past 250 to 300K a month, even if you're below that, you want to use this process to sign your first couple people, is my point. But what I'm trying to get at is, the thing will become not how do we get more clients, but it's how do we get enough talent on the back end to be able to essentially facilitate the volume of new clients that are coming on board on the front end. And this week, again, is not only structured in a way where you can use it to just hire one person if you need to hire one person, but it's also structured in a way, if you follow everything that I go through, it's structured in a way to show you how to do this in a scalable way, how to have a scalable model for talent acquisition, which again, if you aren't feeling this yet, once you get to 250, 300K-ish per month, you'll realize this is going to be the big focus for you, and this is how you do it, all right? So just wanted to give that bit of a prelude there. And the reason why I'm going to go so deep into this section is because everything bad that happens in your business is because of your people. And everything good that happens in your business is because of your people. Period. I think I got this quote from Ben Horowitz. I read a lot, so I sometimes forget where certain quotes came from, but I think it was Ben Horowitz. And this is like the truest thing in the world. And again, as you start to scale, you will realize that people will be your constraint for the good or for the bad. But it always comes back to the people in some form or another. Maybe the current team isn't performing at KPI, and so that is your constraint. Or maybe your current team is doing amazing, but they're getting slammed because the volume is so much and you can't scale anymore because you need more people. But fundamentally, it always comes back to the people. And as a founder, there's no activity more leverage than hiring and training your people. This is, again, once you get to about 250 a month, you'll notice your biggest constraint will always be hiring, and I should say here, training. So in other words, how do you keep your current team at KPI, and how do you ramp new team members to KPI in the quickest time frame possible? Again, independent of position. And this is where you really want to switch your mindset from scalable client acquisition to scalable talent acquisition, which again is what we're going to be going through in this week. So just quickly on this idea, client acquisition versus talent acquisition. The only difference is for client acquisition, you are trying to attract qualified prospects. And for talent acquisition, you are trying to attract qualified candidates. That's the only two difference between those two things. Because in both instances, you need a great offer which attracts qualified candidates or prospects. You need to sell those qualified candidates or prospects on why your company, why should they work with you, or why should they work for you. It's the exact same thing. And again, you need to realize this in order to scale. Talent acquisition is client acquisition. It's the same thing. The only difference is the person at the end of it. But how you achieve it is in the same format. And you'll see there's a lot of similarities between how we build this process out for talent acquisition as there is for client acquisition. And why kind of leading on from this idea, why should they want to work with you and your company? What's in it for them? How is this different from what they've tried, or in other words, places they've worked in the past that never worked out? We have a lot of our account managers have either worked at other agencies or they've even ran their own agencies in the past. And, if more particularly though, if they've worked at other agencies, I need to show in the hiring process why our agency is going to be different. Because just like a lot of clients have had bad experiences with agencies in the past, similarly with talent, a lot of talent have had bad experiences working at other agencies in the past, or they've had bad bosses in general, or people who just didn't truly care. That's one of the pieces of feedback I always get from our team is they always tell me that, I feel like you truly care. I feel like I can achieve my goals here, right? And so you want to be able to show that in your acquisition, just like you want to show how you're different in your client acquisition. It's the same thing for talent acquisition. You must look at talent acquisition in the same way you look at client acquisition, even all the way down to how scalable your methods are for routinely bringing in new candidates. All right. So this is really the big focus of this week, is not only recruiting and hiring A players and high quality candidates, where to find people for account managers, where to find closers, where to find setters, and everyone in between, but also how can we do this in a scalable manner as well. So with that being said, we always start with the scorecard, which is really the main focus of this video. You want to start with your scorecard. So prior to hiring for any position, always start with a scorecard. It's tremendously difficult to find someone when you don't know exactly what you're looking for. What a lot of people tell themselves is, I need an account manager. I need a media buyer. I need a closer. And that's as far as they take it in terms of looking at who actually do they want, right? They just go, a closer. And they go, okay, great. Let me go find a closer. It's like, well, no wonder most people in general don't find good quality candidates and good quality team members. It's because they don't know exactly what they're looking for. A closer isn't specific enough. You need to go more detailed, and a scorecard forces you to do that. And that's why you want to start with it. Because how do you find the perfect fit if you don't know what the perfect fit looks like? The scorecard forces you to detail what that is. And so by having a properly structured scorecard, it allows you to hire the right person for the specific outcome that you need. And leaning on from that example of a sales rep, their key outcomes are to take sales calls, generate sales calls, and ultimately generate a specific amount of revenue each month. And that's what most people think about sales reps. Like, yeah, that's what they do. What's the difference between different closers? Well, the specific amount of revenue each month will determine the experience and quality that you require in the reps, which again helps you find the perfect fit. Are you looking for a closer? And obviously, if you was to ask yourself, how much money do I want my closer to generate for the company? Everyone would say $1 million a month, like as much as possible, right? It's like, yeah, but let's be realistic. Based on your current volume of calls booked, based on your current close rate, based on your price point, offer economics, etc., what is the likely volume that a good closer could produce on your team? I reckon that's probably about 150K a month or 250K a month, or maybe it's a great offer, very, very high ticket. I reckon we could push our top closer to make 500K a month. Okay, great. Well, then based on that production, you can then obviously reverse engineer the compensation, which typically, and we'll get into compensation for all the roles and whatnot, but just off the top, usually it's about 10%. Okay, well, if they're going to produce 500K cash collected for the company each month, that's a 50K closer role right there. Well, then that's going to show you that you can go a much more qualified person. You can go after a much more specific, high quality person, if that is the reality of the position. On the flip side, if you're like, no, I do think they're only probably going to be able to produce 150K a month in new business. And so then that's going to be a 15K per month, roughly based on a 10% commission. That's going to be a 15K per month type closer they're going to make 15K a month roughly in commissions. And so then that's going to show you that, actually, we're not probably going to be able to get this top producer. It's going to be somebody who's more kind of middle, kind of run of the mill, and we can kind of maybe build them up. They might not be perfect right now, but we can slowly build them up, right? This is going to help you find, or at least understand who the best fit for the role is going to be. And also, not only that, but scorecards allow you to turn theory into specific execution. The number one, I always say the number one reason why X doesn't work out or whatever, and I keep saying it, so obviously it's not number one, but one of the common, let's say, reasons why people don't work out on either your team or anyone else's team, from what I've seen, is people, founders, companies will make a hire, and then they'll just expect that hire, that new person to come on their team. They'll expect that they'll know exactly what the company needs and what the company wants them to do and whatnot. They just expect them to know. And then when they inevitably don't do what the company wanted them to do, or in other words, don't do it as good as the company thought, they needed it to be, They then go, oh, this person just didn't work out. And then they'll hire again and they'll do the same thing. And ultimately, the problem there is not the hire, it's you. The problem is the fact that you didn't tell specifically the new hire what you wanted them to do. What are the specific outcomes? How do they win in the role? It's the most common thing that I see with failed hires. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't know what winning looks like. They don't know what high performance looks like. And so again, a scorecard forces you, as I'll show you here in a minute, to turn theory into specific execution. Here is how you win. Here are the specific outcomes that you need to achieve, right? And it shows the candidate that. So then when they come on board, they know exactly what they should be doing every single day. And that is produced by a scorecard. Also, it allows you and your team to have a high level of alignment between outputs and inputs required. Okay, they show clear outcomes that must be achieved by the team, and these also are extremely trackable. So it's objective. It's not subjective. It's not like, oh, I feel like you could be doing better. Well, what does that look like? Instead, it's not that, because that is subjective. Instead, it's, hey, you agreed to doing, 10 closes a month. It wouldn't be 10, 30 closes a month, 25 closes a month. You're currently only generating 10. What's going on? It's specific, it's trackable. So then you can't, the team member can never get angry at you or like whatever with you, because it's not based on your subjective feeling. It's based on facts. Like, you said we'll do 25, you're only doing 10. What's going on? It's specific, it's trackable. And again, you can also track their performance in the role. How are they doing against the specific outcomes that we stated? If the specific outcome you state is, for example, it won't be this, but bit extreme, but you need to run high performing ads for an account manager, as an example. It's like, well, that's not specific, that's not trackable. But when you say you need to generate your clients a $300 CPA on booked calls, and they must close those calls at 25% close rate, right? As an example again. But when it's that specific, the candidate knows exactly what they need to do. The new hire knows exactly what they need to do, and you have something to hold them accountable to, which is what I'm going to get into here in a minute as well. And you can kind of obviously guess, but based on this, you also then start to set clear expectations. Here is what I expect from you. And then the hire also knows, here's what is expected of me. And if they don't achieve that, it's not news to anyone. It's not like, oh, I thought I was doing really well. It's like, everyone knows that you're not performing if you've got clear trackable outcomes. As I say here, it's very evident what you expect from your team, and it's clear what they need to achieve. It also allows you to track your new hires' progress over time. So again, when you come on board, if you've got an ambiguous type outcome, it's like, well, how well are they doing? Well, you don't really know. But if you've got a specific outcome, hey, here, I expect you to produce this many closes per week. And if they're not producing that, well, then you know how they're performing over time. And obviously the outcomes need to be realistic, etc., but you get the point. And also, this is the biggest thing that comes from the score, is that it allows you to get specific agreements with any new hire prior to them coming on board. This way you can manage agreements, not expectations. So if you bring somebody on board and you, again, like I said before, you just expect them to perform, right? Well, now you're starting to manage expectations, which is not good, right? And it never works out. However, if you kind of like, using the example before I said, we expect you to generate I'm still setting expectations. That's not what I'm saying here. But it's what you manage. So you'll see how this works out, right? So I go, we expect you to take 100 live calls per month. If it was a closer, because it's easy, 100 live calls a month, we expect you to close at 25%, which would be 20 new closes per month. How do you feel on that? Do you feel like that is something that you could achieve based on this volume, etc.? Do you agree? What are your thoughts on this? Then you get an agreement from the new hire. Yes, I agree to doing that. Yes, that makes sense. Yes, I can do that. Then when they come on board, and if they're not producing at that level, then you can go, hey, here's what we agreed to. Here's what you're currently doing. What's going on? What is causing this delta? How can I better serve you? Right? As opposed to saying, hey, I expected you to do more. And they go, well, I can't. And it's like, well, it's not productive. So this allows you to have productive management on the back end. And again, it all stems from the scorecard. And the scorecard, by the way, shouldn't just be used in your recruiting or the hiring process. It should also be used to manage the team, because that is what you hold them accountable to, is the specific outcomes listed on the scorecard that they agree to in the hiring process. And you can even do this internally. So like, for example, if an account manager or somebody achieves the initial outcomes of their initial scorecard that they agree to upon you hiring them, well, if they achieve that, then you can create a new scorecard internally on the back end, not for hiring, but for the person who's achieved the current outcomes, for a new set of outcomes, and then you can manage them against those new set of outcomes, even if they've already been hired. So I don't want you to think, the scorecard is something that you can only do or only use or leverage in the hiring process. But this is where it starts. So let's get into the structure. Oh, and just a quick note on this as well, really quick. The scorecard idea I got from the book Who. Can't remember the author, but the book Who. If you want to go deeper into this stuff, highly recommend it. All right, so the structure of the scorecard. You start with the mission. I'm going to show you live examples here that we are actually currently using for our own positions that we're hiring for. So you can just basically copy paste them. But it starts with the mission. So the mission details specifically what the goal is, right? What specific metrics define success in this role. That is the mission statement for the role in particular. The mission must be tightly aligned with where you're at right now, where you want to go, and what the goal is of the position. What the goal is of this position to get there. How does this position tie into the company achieving their goal? That is how you're going to be able to attract the highest quality level of candidates and talent, really, is when they can see, oh, I can see how this position that, I'm potentially, being hired for, I can see how this ties into the greater goal of or greater vision of the company. That is key. The times that you'll typically attract the lowest quality candidates is when they feel as though it's just like a run of the mill type position. I always think of like a hamster running on a wheel thing. They're not getting anywhere, and they're the one, the roles where it's kind of just not doing anything. It's not going anywhere. It's not producing any tangible, impactful outcome, etc. They're the ones that always attract the lowest quality candidates. So it should show how this role ties into achieving the overarching vision of the company. Okay. Then you go into outcomes. So the outcomes highlight what the hire needs to accomplish in the role specifically. That's key. Outcomes highlight what the hire needs to accomplish in the role. Now these outcomes are ranked in order of importance. So your outcomes must be black and white, and from top to bottom prioritized, right? Here's the number one thing, the second, the third, the fourth, etc. And the higher, this is how you want to structure your outcomes. It must be structured in a way to where they achieve the outcome or they don't. There's no in between. And that's key to the management aspect, because then you can get agreements from the candidate on each specific outcome. And again, on the back end, you want to use the scorecard as a tool for management. And the only way you can really use it as an effective tool for management is by having on the scorecard the outcomes structured in a way to where it's like, you are not achieving this outcome that you agree to on the interview, right? That is how you want your outcomes to be structured. You don't want them to be, like I said before, create high performing ads for your clients. What does that mean? That's ambiguous. It's subjective. Are they good? Are they not? Whatever. Whereas if that was, you was hiring for an account manager, instead of saying create high performing ads, you would write specifically what a high performing ad looks like, what CPA, what cost per purchase if it's e-com, what cost per booking, what cost per lead, etc. Whatever your main metric is, that is how you would want to structure it. What does that look like? Because then again, it's they achieve it or they don't. That's it. There's no in between. All right. As I say, you can probably tell this is extremely important because it makes it also easier, so much easier for managing. And then also if it comes to the point where you have to fire someone, it's so much easier because it's black and white. There shouldn't be any emotion involved, etc. So outcomes focus on what needs to get done, not what the inputs are. So for example, recruit 25 new sales reps per month and place into clients' businesses. If you were looking at like a hiring manager, for example, not use job boards and ads to recruit sales reps. Because again, they could be doing this, but not performing, not actually generating the outcome of the position, which is, yes, these are the inputs, but who cares about the input? It's the output that matters. And this also, as I say here, gives hires autonomy on the process while still requiring them to hit specific outcomes. This is also key for attracting high quality talent. High quality talent don't want to be micromanaged. In a way, I actually have different opinions on micromanaging. I think it's good in some instances, but my point is overall, you should be able to give your team autonomy on the process, meaning the inputs. They may not use job boards. They may use something else, but as long as they're generating the outcome specifically that you require them to generate, who cares what they're doing on the input side of things? Now, there is some positions like VAs or whatever where you really want to manage them based on inputs, and that's fine. But for most roles, you want to make sure you give hires autonomy on the process, but you don't want to do that to the extent to where then you give them too much autonomy, no one's performing and no one knows about it. For example, I had a client, I was speaking with him a couple of weeks ago, and he just come to mind on this. He gave his closer in particular way too much autonomy. His closer hadn't closed the deal in 6 months, and the closer was still on board. I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what's going on here? Way too much autonomy. So this gives the autonomy required that high quality talent wants to see, but again, it's still requires them to hit specific key outcomes. And that's, again, ultimately the goal of the outcome section. All right. Then you go into competencies. So the mission defines the essence of the job to a high degree of specificity. Now, outcomes describe what must be accomplished. And then the competencies define how you expect a new hire to operate in the fulfillment of the job and the achievement of the outcome. So how and which do they, for example, if this was the position, would you want this person to go out and lie and say that you have bigger clients than what you have than what you have, and get them all excited? So yes, they achieve the outcomes of 25 new sales reps because everyone thinks they're going to go work for $1 billion company. And again, this is an extreme example, but easy to prove the point. But then obviously when those people, once they agree, then they get on and they realize actually none of your clients are at $1 billion a year, right? Well, no, you won't want that. So yes, they achieved the outcome in that instance, but they didn't do it with, for example, integrity, which might be one of your key competencies for a hiring manager type role, right? As an example, that was just riffed off the top. But hopefully that kind of explains the difference between, obviously the mission, outcomes, and competencies. Now, your competencies should be in alignment with your culture. This ensures the way that the outcomes get carried out is in alignment, again, with your core values and your culture, which is also super important. And again, you'll want to get agreements on the competencies, because then that way, if they agree to the competencies, in other words, they're kind of also agreeing to your values and your culture. This is also how you hire people in alignment with your culture, right? And obviously values. And then finally, I always like to finish off with compensation. So this is where you detail the OTE, on track earnings, and show how this ties into them achieving the specific outcomes that you detailed above. Ideally, you want your comp to be tiered to where the better they perform, the more they make, and you still want the OTE to be in alignment with the candidate's, obviously, goal income. And if you can do that, ideally you want to make your highest tier in alignment with their goal income. And then that way, the more they perform, the more money they're going to make, and the better they perform, they're actually going to make that goal income. That goes back to kind of what I said earlier about talent acquisition versus client acquisition, and the fact that you always have to have a really good offer. Obviously, there's a lot more to a really good offer for a candidate than just the OTE or the money, the on-track earnings of the position. However, it is a huge part. And so that's also another selling point that you can have on your scorecard. And again, this all goes back to just attracting the right people for the role and selling them on why you, all right? Okay, so scorecards essentially help you map your yearly business plan to each individual team member's outcomes and track their performance against those set outcomes, again, once they come on board. So here are some examples of scorecards. So I'm only going to show one of them here, but you can obviously access this doc right below this video. You can open up all of these others. And again, I really would recommend for you to just mirror the ones that I've got here. If you need to hire an account manager, you can mirror this. Obviously change it for your deliverables, whatever. Closer, same thing. Let me show you, I'll show you a closer example. Maybe I'll pull this up as well, just for context. All right, so let me actually show you this. So this is how I always structure it, right? Again, it's in the same framework as what I explained here. So mission, outcomes, competencies, compensation. So the closer, mission for the closer, outcomes, again, ranked in order of importance. Competencies, how should they be acting when they're achieving the outcomes? And then finally, compensation. So in this instance with the closer, so the mission for the closer, to take at least 35 sales calls per week with our ideal client and prove to them that ScaleClients.io is absolutely the best solution to scale their ANTL coaching business. There's been numerous times, and this is all true, obviously, there's been numerous times where our prospect tries another solution, in other words, one of our competitors, and ends up losing tens of thousands of dollars and comes back to us wanting our help. As soon as they join us, they immediately see results and start scaling. It's completely black and white at this point. ScaleClients.io gets better client results than any other agency or coach in the space. As a closer, yes, you need to quote close, but more importantly, you need to make prospects make the best decision for the health of their business, and every single time that decision is to work with us, no question about it. And so in order to fully or truly facilitate this, you also need to be hitting your pipeline extremely hard and following up with everyone you've spoken to in the past to get them back on the phone to join. We typically see 30 to 40% of total deals come from pipeline. So there you can see, not only, a lot of people, they'll think the mission for the closer is to close deals, bro, like close more clients, right? It's like, yeah, but you want to make sure that you're tying it into a bigger reason, like what's going to motivate them to continue to perform every single month, day in, day out, right? Well, this is why. It's because it ties to a bigger reason behind it. And so that's what again, look at this and you can see how I'm setting expectations for the role, but I'm also subtly selling them as well. It's a sales letter in a way, right? For talent, for candidates. And in here we get better results, and it's true, I'm not lying. We get better results than anyone else in the industry. And one of the most common things that I see with closers is they're tired and burnt out, not from closing, but from closing on offers that they kind of know deep down aren't the best offers, that aren't getting their clients results. It's like that drains you. That is what just really kills a lot of closers, honestly, and their performance in particular, and just their drive and desire to wake up every day is when they know they're closing these clients, these prospects on offers that just don't get their clients results. Like, they know they're probably not going to get results, right? So I know that, and so that's a selling point for us because we actually get our clients results. And so you can see again there how I'm kind of selling them, right? Outcomes, I'll just list the big one. You can obviously go into the specific details of each one, but outcomes, right? Number one, the most important thing, 375K. Again, this is for our offer based on our economics. I've done the numbers, as you can see here. 375K per month in new contracted revenue. That's the number one, first outcome. And again, notice how that's first. And the second one is 25% minimum live call close. Because at the end of the day, if they're just not sleeping, right? Which they would be, obviously, but if they're just not sleeping, they're taking, 20 live calls per day, and they're only closing at 10%, but they are generating this much, they're generating the number per month in new contracted revenue. That's all I care about. Now, obviously, they need to make sure that their CPA would be good, and so that would factor into their live call close rate, which, again, is why this is the second most important thing. But just notice that, again, it's structured in order of priority in terms of the outcomes. Then we have the daily admin tasks last, and then we also, for every role, we always say that you need to source 3 A-player candidates per year. And there's a whole reason why behind that. Basically, the best people who are going to know your culture, or the people who can give you the best referrals for new talent, just like client acquisition. It's, again, I'm always going to keep coming back to that idea. Client acquisition is the same thing as talent acquisition. The best clients to work with are always referrals. The easiest ones to close are always referrals. It's the same thing with talent, with your team. The best new account managers, if you need another account manager, or the best new closers that you're going to get if you need another closer, are the ones referred to by your current team, because they're going to do a lot of the pre-screening for you, right? They're going to think, oh no, that person that other closer that I know, yeah, they're not probably going to fit here, or that, no, he would do really well here. They know that because they're in the culture, they're in the company, so they know who's going to work well and who's not. And also, just in general, good closers, no good closers. Good account managers, no good account managers. People congregate. So anyway, that's why we do it. Then finally, second last, we've got competencies. So for closers, with those specifically, again, you want to tailor these to you and your company. But for us, it's efficiency, aggressiveness, calm under pressure, enthusiasm, work ethic, persuasion, obviously with closers, communication, again, obviously, and high standards. And then finally, we have the performance-based compensation. So you can see kind of the tier structure here that I was talking about. And for our closers, we do 10% cash collected, but don't worry about that in terms of compensation, how to structure it, because we're going to go through that deeper in a later training when it makes sense. So that's the closer. The mission for the account manager and the scorecard for the account manager, essentially, clients come to us because they need a way to consistently, repeatedly, and scalably acquire new clients for their ANTL coaching business. As the account manager, you are in charge of facilitating that process for our clients. Essentially, the sole mission for any account manager is to provide a system for our clients where the inputs are directly correlated with the outputs, so that ultimately they are in complete control over the scale of their business. This is exactly how we're going to achieve our mission of eliminating the I've been burnt in the past conversation that all online businesses have. You as the account manager are at the forefront of leading this initiative. So, I mean, when you think about tying a role into the overall mission with our account managers, they literally are the guys on the front line, literally are the ones leading this whole entire initiative of, achieving our vision. And so that's the easiest way to tie them into it, is because they actually are the guys doing it, right? So, but again, notice how I tie the mission of their role into the bigger company vision. Right? This gives them a deeper reasoning why. And again, high quality talent, high quality candidates will prefer that. They don't want to be in a hamster wheel type position, right? They want to be something where if they perform, everyone's going to benefit. If they don't perform, everyone's kind of going to be looking on them a little bit, right? They want that responsibility. They want that weight on their shoulders. So the outcomes for our account managers is, again, look how specific this is. Sub $300 cost per qualified booked call. You don't get much more specific than that. And again, you either achieve this or you don't. Become your client's growth partner. This one's slightly more ambiguous. I could probably honestly do a better job of making it more specific, but even what in the explanation, I do go more specific, and it is almost black and white in terms of did you do it or not, because I say have exceptional client communication, quality responses and fast responses equals exceptional client communication. So we can kind of track this. What is the quality of their response and how quick? Again, I could say a more of a specific time, but in the ramp of any of our new account managers, I go through like the exact client communication cadence, and how they need to be responding and whatnot. So that is trackable, but you get the point. Set rejections with clients, and force inputs. And then conduct daily admin tasks, and same thing again, source A player candidates per year. Competencies here, you can check those out. Performance-based compensation, it basically is, again, tiered. 25 clients under management, 8,700 a month. 30 clients under management, 10.5 a month. 35, 12.2 a month, okay? So again, though, I'll link this doc below so you can check out all of these on your own. So to finish off here, start your hiring process with building out the scorecard so you know exactly what you are looking for during the sourcing process, right? Which again is going to be the next stage where we're going to go through in the next video, finding your key players. You got to start with the scorecard so you know what to look for. The most common reason why people don't find or hire quality talent is because they don't know what quality talent looks like. The scorecard forces you to figure that out. And again, if you need help on this stuff as well, always remember you can hit us up in Slack. We do this at a very high level, and so either your account manager can help you. You can jump on a call with me if you want, and I can help you as well. And so as well as once you make the new hire, you would have gotten clear agreements like I was speaking about before from their end of the outcomes that they are going to achieve. And if they don't, it won't be a surprise when they're let go. So this sets you up. So you might feel as though, yeah, this is only going to help me with hiring. But then 3 months in or 2 months into the relationship with this new hire, if they're not performing, you got to make sure you got that scorecard as your point of reference almost to where you can say, again, this is what we agreed to. This is what you're producing. What's going on? And then you can also take, I'm not saying like fire them straight away, but you can take the stance of, like I said before, this is what you agreed to. This is what's going on. This is what you're currently doing. This is what you're currently producing. What's causing this delta, and how can I better serve you? What do you need from me to be able to help you achieve the specific outcomes that you agree to? The reason why I'm asking this is because obviously you got this account manager, this account manager, this account manager on the team who's achieving these outcomes. So I know it's possible, but maybe there's a disconnect with you specifically. So I want to see, how can I best serve you? What do you need from me to help you achieve this specific outcome? So you see how I'm then leveraging the scorecard for management on the back end. And obviously that's only one specific instance, but hopefully you get the point. So start with the scorecard, build this out. If you want us to review your scorecard, send it through to the Slack channel. We're more than happy to give you some insight, feedback, and advice on that side of things. And then obviously from there, once you've only once you've done the scorecard, can you then go into the next training, which is finding your key players. So with that being said, I'll see you there. All right, so in this one, we're going to go through finding your key players, finding your A players, and ultimately just finding great talent, sourcing great talent. And what I want to preface this video with is by saying, I'm going to be telling you what you need to hear in this one, not necessarily what you want to hear. Probably what you want to hear is go here to find great, this place has great talent, or this place has great talent, and just post in this place and you'll get amazing closers or amazing account managers, whatever it may be. But that place does not exist. Anyone who tells you it does exist is lying to you. Trust me, because it does not exist. And so when it comes to, and by the way, this is the most common question that I get asked by far, is where do I find great, team members? And again, there's no secret directory, as I say here. There is no secret directory of A players. It doesn't exist. And so the next logical question is, well, then how do you find A players? Well, there's two ways that we do it from a high level. Number one is not only looking when you need to hire someone. And number two, realizing, again, talent acquisition is the same thing as client acquisition. So being forced to hire someone due to time constraints, or really any reason, whether it's time constraints or capacity constraints or whatever it might be, always results in a bad hire, misfit, or a mistake. And more specifically, it's where you then hire non-cultural fits, people who don't align with your values, people who don't really care about your vision or your mission. And the reason why is because if you need someone yesterday, then the first, and you do a quick post somewhere, wherever that might be, the first 1 to 3 candidates that are going to apply, you're going to look at them, and all you're most of the time going to look at is their experience. Because, for example, if you needed an account manager who can, I always use this example because it's just super easy. You need an account manager who can run Facebook ads, right? Or who can coach on, in whatever coaching business that you have, they can coach on the topic that you're coaching on. Well, then if they can do that, you're going to hire that person because in your mind, they're like, oh, they can run ads. That's what I need. And you don't then factor in, well, hang on a minute, and take a step back and go, are they a cultural fit? Do they align with our values? Do they actually care about our vision? Do they, do I feel as though they could be on the boat with us, rowing in the same direction, with the rest of the team? You're not going to factor those things in. Why? Because you need someone yesterday. And so if they can run ads, that's good enough for you right now. And what then happens every single time is that person might come on board. They might be able to run a couple ads for your clients, or do a couple coaching sessions with your clients, whatever it is that your deliverables are. This is independent of deliverables and also is independent of position. They might do okay initially, but then they're always going to churn on the back end. Why? Because they fundamentally never bought into your vision, didn't align with your values, and just they didn't align with the culture that you have, right? And the reason why is because you would rush the hire. Because again, you left it too late, you didn't have a bench, and you just needed to hire someone. So the first person who looked half decent, you brought on board. That situation is so common, you wouldn't believe it. And probably if you look at yourself and your past hires, you've probably done that. And I can confidently say that because I know I did that in the past as well. And so that's the number one problem with people hiring, is they leave it too late. And so you want to combat this by never not sourcing new talent. You should always be on the lookout for new talent and striking up conversations with potential candidates. Ideally, you want to block out 30 to 60 minutes every week just to focus on sourcing candidates and nurturing current candidates, right? And you'll see how we do this with the hiring VSL and the application in the next couple trainings, but just know that this is really what you should be doing. And again, as a founder, like I said in the beginning, the very first training in this section, I mentioned in there, there's nothing more leverage that you could be doing as a founder, especially as you get past 100, 200, 300K a month. There's nothing more leverage that you could be doing other than finding great people to come onto your team and training your current people. There's nothing more leverage that you could be doing. And so when it comes to like looking at this, doing an hour, even an hour a week, and this is more so referring to when you don't need new people, you should be doing an hour a week. But then obviously when you feel as though, okay, we're gonna need somebody new, pretty soon, you never want to leave it to the last minute. You always want to project like, okay, I feel as though, the start of next month, in 30 days or so, or whatever it might be, we're going to need a new account manager. That's when you should start to hire, not, okay, we need an account manager right now, right? It's too late. And so point being, though, in those instances where you can feel as though, or you do feel as though we need someone in the 30 days or so, that's where you should be going way more than 30 to 60 minutes. And really that should become your full-time job. It's just recruiting at that point, right? A lot of the time, I really do feel as though I'm a recruiting manager more so than a CEO. So just for context. All right. So sourcing channels though. So where do you actually go? Because like I said, there's no secret directory, but there are places that you do want to go. So sourcing channels in order. You want to start warm and move your way out, which is why this is structured in this way. So you start with your current team. No one really thinks about this, but ask yourself, who knows your culture and overall company the best? Your team, because they're in it. And so they will bring you the most qualified candidates because they will subconsciously do a lot of the screening for you. They'll think, oh, that person won't be a good fit here, or they'll actually probably fit in really well here. Let me link them up with founder, with you, right? Whatever it might be. So they do a lot of the pre-screening. And also, again, as always, same thing as client acquisition. The best clients are referrals. The easiest to close are referrals. It's the same thing with referrals from your current team on talent acquisition. Same thing. The best candidates are typically referrals. All right. So so start with your current team. And just a quick side note before I continue here. Do all of these, right? Too many people have, I believe there's a saying, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's like the idea of, it's called the tyranny of or. In so many words, I believe it basically refers to the idea that people in their mind, it's like, should I do this or this? It's like, do both. Like, don't think it's or, it's and. Do both. Do the current team. Like, do everything. Because again, in the sourcing aspect, how you find great talent is through volume, not identifying like one hyper specific place to just make one job post once and hopefully you get the best talent from that. No. The way you find the best talent, if there's one thing you take away from this training, is volume. So in other words, do all of these. It's not do the current team or do I do this or do I do that. It's do the current team, do the next one, go to your current client / customer base. This primarily, I would say, is more tailored to coaching businesses because, if you're a done-for-you agency and you work with HVAC owners, I mean, there might be, some of your clients that may be that may be interested in working with you as an account manager, for example, because they also have the experience of running a HVAC company. If your clients are HVAC companies, that could work, but it's not as common as if, you're a coaching business and you help people build a dropshipping company, as an example. And, one of your top clients now has built his own dropshipping store, but he wants to become an account manager, or she wants to become an account manager for you. That always often works very, very well. So go to your current customer base. And you can do this in two ways, by the way. You can either source clients directly, or you can ask if they know any highly talented people for the role. And if you ask, hey, do you know anyone for this? And then you kind of sell the role in how I'll show you in a minute. That will kind of get both. They'll naturally refer people to you, and also it will naturally get the clients themselves, because they'll say, actually, I'm interested. So that works really well. Again, do that as well as the team. Then also your personal and or professional network. So you want to ask for referrals from your network, right? Hey, do you know any world-class setters, for example? What I usually do is I go through my Facebook and Instagram DMs, my messages, etc., and I hit up everyone that I've contacted with in the past, and I ask if they know if they know anyone. Also, what you can do here to make it kind of seem more of a desirable offer, it's like, hey, do you know any world-class setters? I'm currently looking for 2, and we're also giving a 10K sign-in bonus, right? As an example. The 10K signing bonus aspect will also, again, not only be desirable if your network then actually refers you out to somebody else, you'll get more referrals that way, but also your network directly might say, actually, I'm interested in the position, and then they'll hit you up and, whatever. So that works really well. Also, just audience. So the audience directly, or again, same thing, referrals from your audience. So the audience refers to, your Facebook audience, your Instagram followers, your email list if you have one, your LinkedIn, your Twitter, your YouTube, etc. Always go to your audience. And even if you don't feel as though your audience is, you don't feel as though your audience is kind of related to what it is that you do, still post. Again, don't feel like, oh, there's probably not many people in there. Well, if you post, the alternative is no one responds. Okay, no problem. But no one's going to respond if you don't post anyway. So again, you got to look at the alternative. What's the alternative if I do this? Well, it's, I'm way more likely to get candidates if I make the post. So make the post, right? Also, these are the ones then, so these ones are kind of initially, you'll get great candidates from these places, but also obviously the volume, maybe depending on your situation, might not be the most, you probably won't get the most volume from these areas. Whereas these last 3, you're going to get the most volume, but also it's the coldest. So again, think to client acquisition. These are going to give you your best candidates. These are going to give you your most, but typically lower quality. However, you make up for the volume. So because you get so much volume, naturally there's going to be some real good people in there. But again, you got to optimize for volume when you're sourcing candidates. So you want to start with obviously other people's niche, which really other people's niche in alignment with the position, which more specifically refers to Facebook groups, Upwork, and any other freelance sites, Reddit, etc. These are honestly amazing. Like you might think, oh, Upwork, like that's terrible people, but again, there's great talent on there, number one, but if you go for volume, which you will get from an Upwork or a Facebook group, etc. And again, it's not like you do Upwork or Facebook groups, you do it all. And then as you'll see here, you drive them all to the VSL and you filter them in the application, but you want to optimize for volume. For context, we get into this, but you want to get around 50 to 100 applicants per role that you're hiring for. That's the volume that you want to be going for. Ideally, if it's for a common role like a closer or an account manager, you want to be nearing 100. So these are great places to do it, right? And when I say about other people's niche in alignment with a position, if you need an account manager and you have a done for you website creation offer, then you want to go to Facebook groups that are in alignment with website development or developers in general. Or if even more specific, I'm sure there's a bunch of Facebook groups. If you do Webflow website creation, then go to Facebook groups that are full of Webflow experts, right? Like Webflow expert Facebook groups. There'll be loads of them. And just make your posts in there, which we'll get onto here in a minute with the job advertisement, and keep reposting. And again, just get as much volume as possible. Obviously, same thing with these other websites as well. You can also do job boards. Job boards are kind of hit and miss. I prefer job boards for more common positions, I would say, such as, so for example, I just hired a CFO. That I didn't go to a job board, but I could have gone to a job board if I didn't. I actually got my CFO from my personal network, not even my professional network. It was my personal network. So these are all the ways to get people applying to you. So you're always going to use one of them. And I got that mine from a personal network. But point being, job boards are great for those more common roles, right? A recruiting manager. That's like, independent of industries. Every industry has recruiting managers, CFOs, COOs, etc. Whereas I found with account managers, for example, or closers even, like these sales reps, these door-to-door sales reps, like that's kind of independent of industry. However, closers in our context with like marketing agencies and high ticket coaching offers, etc., that's so niche specific that I do find that for those roles, it's better to do Facebook, it's better to basically do niche specific audiences like Facebook groups and network, etc. You won't typically find great closers or account managers. Like, for example, Facebook ad media buyers as an account manager. You're not going to find many of those on job boards, because on job boards, it's more not corporate-y people, but just more common roles like a CFO or like a recruiting manager, or like an ops person, right? That's super common. So just something to think about. And then finally, you can do ads. So you can actually run ads to the hiring VSL exactly in the same way in which we do client acquisition. You can do ads. And typically for that, Facebook is the best. So these are all of the ways for you to find or generate candidates and applications. And again, don't fall into the tyranny of or, do them all and continue to push. And again, this is why you never want to wait until you have to hire somebody, because you want to make sure you keep reposting and reposting and reposting in all of these groups. That takes a period of time. We'll get into the cadence here in a minute, but that takes a period of time. If you need someone yesterday, you don't have that time, which then is why that always forces you to make basically a bad hire in most cases. So anyway, that's that. Now let's get into the job advertisement. So most entrepreneurs, by the way, if you want to go deeper into this idea, read the book Ready, Fire, Aim by Mark Ford. He was the one who kind of made me realize this. But most entrepreneurs look at talent acquisition through the lens of the entrepreneur having all the power, meaning the entrepreneur thinks they don't need to sell the candidate because the candidate would be, quote, lucky to get the position. What most fail to realize is that you have a true A player on your hands. They most likely won't just have your offer that they're weighing up. They will have a myriad of potential offers. And so the question becomes, why would they choose to move forward with you? Now, your job advertisement should sell what the job offers the candidate, not what the company is looking for. In other words, it should answer the question of what's in it for me from the candidate or the potential hire's perspective. What's in it for them? That's what you should sell, not, hey, here's what we're looking for, right? And as a side note, longer ad copy has been proven to get more qualified candidates to respond, more qualified, maybe not necessarily more candidates, but more qualified candidates to respond. And again, read the book Ready, Fire, Aim if you want to go deeper into that idea. Also, look at your job post through the lens of client acquisition. You must find your target audience, have a great lead, great opening, right? Detail the benefits that your company offers, have a compelling CTA. Again, exactly the same as client acquisition. So let's get into some examples here, because this is going to be the easiest way to prove my point. A bad example, right? Let's say, for example, you're hiring a recruiting manager. Here's a bad example. Here's the most common example of what people post when it comes to them generating candidates, and then people realize why they get such bad quality, right? This is the reason, right? We're hiring. We're looking for an A player recruitment specialist with at least 4 years experience. You'll be paid $100 per new qualified candidate and an extra $500 per new hire. You'll also be in charge of sourcing the candidates and the end-to-end interview process. Click the link below and submit your application. Terrible example. Here's a great example. And look at the difference, all right? Again, hiring the same position. Tired of constantly recruiting talent and then having an extremely high attrition rate due to lack of culture, effective onboarding, ramping, and overall team morale? Our current head of recruiting, Sam, said the same thing when she joined us 4 years ago. She said that we're the only company she's worked with that focuses strictly on building an unshakable culture and decreasing attrition to almost 0%. And right now, we are looking for a star recruitment specialist to join Sam as we are quickly expanding. Currently, we're hiring 12 new people per month, and we expect that to double in the following 3 months. Internal training, masterminds, and private one-on-one coaching will be provided so that you can increase your performance, efficiency, and overall effectiveness within the role. We're not looking to hire a recruitment manager who will stay as a recruitment manager. We want to develop you into the CRO, the Chief Recruiting Officer, who will run your own team and lead the recruitment division as a whole. Compensation is performance-based, no limit on upside potential of both growth growth and monthly income. If you're a recruiting manager and are tired of spinning your wheels at other companies, then submit an application by clicking the link below. You can see how that's that probably could be better. Obviously, we don't hire recruiting managers, so this was just something I wrote off the top of my head. But you can see how different this is versus this, and how much more qualified people would apply and be interested based on this job post versus obviously this one, right? Now, let's get into some real life examples. So this is one for an account manager, and this is actually one that we have made in the past. Now, just quickly on this. So doing a bounty is super powerful when asking for referrals. So if you're looking for a manager / C-suite hire, I've seen bounties for 15 to 20K, right? Meaning if you refer me someone and that person becomes the hire that I'm looking for, becomes the manager or the C-suite, the CMO or whatever it is that you're looking for, I'll give you, because you referred them, 20K. Right? So like super incentive, it makes them super incentivized to actually go and look for you, right? Because you got to make it make sense. Not everyone's just going to jump off their back and like go do everything they can to get you a hire if there's nothing in it for them. So you got to look at the referrals from a perspective of how can I make it a no-brainer for the person that could potentially come on board. So you got to make the job offer itself make sense, but then also for the referrer, you got to make it make sense for them as well. A bounty is a great way to do that. Now the offer for someone actively searching for candidates for you needs to be attractive, like I just said. Also, just another quick note on this, a signing bonus can also work extremely well. So, in other words, if you join the team, I'll give you a 10K signing bonus. This is really attractive, primarily for candidates who are on the fence about joining. So this is more so for the actual candidate themselves, not the referrer specifically, but selling the idea that you'll give them a decent size signing bonus is super attractive. Again, especially if it's someone that's they're kind of weighing up a few roles and they're like, I don't really know, but you really want them to come on board. Drop them a signing bonus. Most of the time they'll take it. But anyway, that's just a side note. So this is a job post that we made, which again, by the way, this framework has gotten all of our current account managers, because it's the one that I just keep rinse and repeating because it works so well for attracting talent. So 1K bounty if you know this person. We're looking for a paid media director to lead the marketing department of a 5 million per year agency, scorecard's.io. I just realized this example is actually for our paid media director, but actually it's very similar for the account manager as well. So the starting compensation will be 10K a month, and you will also receive performance incentives so that you are able to partake on the upside, or I should say in the upside, as we scale monthly ad spend to and beyond 100K a month. We are aiming to be at a 300K a month ad spend within 8 months and be closing 100 to 120 new clients per month. About scorecard's.io, we're a marketing agency that has one sole focus. Basically, insert our vision. We currently have about 100 active clients who consist of marketing agencies and coaches, which we run ads for, and we become their partner in helping them scale to $1 million a month. Our team is currently 10 people, and so far in the last 12 months, we've generated roughly 30 million in closed deals for our clients combined. This is purely in agency or high ticket sales, not ecom. And I make that distinction because a lot of people in ecom like flex that they've made so much money, but sales are much easier to generate in ecom. We currently this is old, like, we're way past this now, but we currently spend about 60K a month in ad spend on our own ads, and this is where the paid media director role comes into play. Side note, this role is for our internal advertising, not for our clients. What the role entails, basically some details on the role. If you know of anyone who fits this criteria, then please send them this link to apply. Hiring VSL, which we'll get onto in the next video. If we end up working together, then I'll send you 1K for making the introduction. Conversely, if you're interested in the position yourself, please also visit Hiring VSL to apply. I break down the role in much more detail and provide a crystal clear walkthrough of exactly what we are looking for here. Thank you for your time. So you can see here how much I'm selling the candidate on why us, first of all, how we're different, and also what's in it for you from the candidate's perspective. What's in it for them? What are they getting out of it? Why should they even care about this, right? This works tremendously well. And the other thing I was going to say as well is how many people actually reference, like people genuinely care about this stuff. Where are you currently at? Where are you going? How's this role going to impact that growth, etc.? So many people bring that up to me in the interviews. It's insane. So people really, really genuinely do care about this. So that's an account manager, paid media director type example. Also, here's a closer example. Now, this was a very old one that I did, but it also worked really well. So 15K per month in pure commission for our sales reps is the bare minimum that they make month on month. Jordan Belfort doesn't have nothing on us. Okay, maybe he does, but he's not hiring. We are. If you're a sales rep with a small amount of experience and you're wanting to join a team of A players who will 100% hold you accountable with savages, work from anywhere and collect more in cash per month than most CEOs or founders, have an unthinkable amount of impact on people's lives, scale to clients.io truly changes lives, and be recognized for and compensated for the work that you do and love it. If that's you, then shoot me a DM to chat. A few key requirements, however, you must be able to commit full time. You absolutely must be coachable. You need some baseline experience. You must like cash. If that's you, then click the link below to see a behind the scenes explainer video on the role and our company. Take action now, because if you don't, this position will go and we won't be hiring for a few months. We don't hire randomly or frequently. Our team is savage as we have more output than most sales teams combined. If you're a slight bit interested, then again, click the link below. So this one's not as good, but you can still see it's not like this, which is how most people make their job posts, right? I think this one's probably the best example though, because this is the most recent that I wrote. So with the job advertisement itself, what you want to do is you want to create 3 angles of the job ad itself. And by the way, on the job ad, always send it through to your account manager, because we can obviously go through, give you some feedback, etc. Because this is just copywriting. That's all it is. It doesn't really matter what your offer is, what your industry is, etc. We can help you with it, because again, it's just good copywriting, because it's the same thing as client acquisition, right? So create 3 angles, post in as many places as you possibly can. So this goes back to what I said before about the sourcing channels. Post in all of these places. Ask everyone, use the job post in every place. For example, in your audience, post it on your Facebook story and as a post. Post it on your Instagram and as a post. Email it to your email list. Post it on LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn. Post it on your Twitter if you have a Twitter. YouTube if you have YouTube. And also post in all of these Facebook groups. All the repeat your postings on Upwork, etc. Post everywhere. Say it to everyone. Advertise it everywhere. And then what you want to do is not only post it everywhere, but then post the 3 angles over a week or so, depending on the placement. So, you got to make sure, obviously, you're following kind of guidelines. If it's a Facebook group, typically individual Facebook groups have their own kind of rules behind how often you can post, how much you can post, etc. So just make sure that you're following those guidelines. Otherwise, you will get kicked out. But, post, over the 3 angles that you created over a week or so, and then find whichever angle within reason. If there's one that really stood out, in terms of performance, like so many more people responded to this job post versus this job post, then what you want to do is take that highest performing job post and then just repeat posting that over and over again for, basically until, as I say here, don't stop reposting until you have 50 to 100 candidates, or in other words, applications, which again, we'll get onto how that whole process works. But that's what you want to keep reposting until you have about 50 to 100. And then you can then only look at that point, the applications, and start actually your filtering process. But don't really, don't make decisions off of 10 applications, right? Because of course you're going to be forced to make a bad hire if you're limited to 5 people who have applied. Generate 100 candidates, because again, talent is found in volume every single time when it comes to hiring. Now, just on this, it can be slightly, and when I say slightly, I'm really referring to like 30, like when I say slightly lower, maybe 30 to 50, if the position is more niche. So for example, when we was hiring our paid media director, this was a very niche position because of the requirements and the level of experience and whatnot. So I think we generated maybe like 35 or something for the paid media director role. But if it's for a more common position, like a closer or an account manager or a setter or whatever, always be leaning on 100, in my opinion. And so a candidate is someone who submits a completed application, which will be the next few steps. And so with all of these job posts, make sure you write them, as I say, in this way. Make sure that they sell the position, why your company, what's in it for the candidate themselves, why should they come work with you, how are you different from everyone else, etc. And then those job posts then want to redirect all of the traffic to the hiring VSL, which is going to be the next training here. So any questions on this, let us know. And again, with your job post, send it through to your account manager. We can go through, do a review, give you some feedback if needed. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next training where we'll break down the hiring VSL, which is where you send all of the traffic from your job post to. So I'll see you. All right, so in this one, we're going to go through the hiring VSL. Now, as I've been hyping up a little bit in the job, finding your key players training, the hiring VSL is so key to not only, again, attracting quality talent, but also having this funnel set up in a way to where it's scalable. Like I mentioned I will be mentioning in the application section, in our application, I'll just quickly show you here. We have basically a pipeline And we have this Zap set up to where it zaps all the new applications into this into our pipeline. Let me show you. Actually. So this is an example pipeline. We get it. I show you all of the back end of this and whatnot in that application training. But in here, you can see we have applications, and we have one of these set up for every role, right? Account managers, closers. We have like a placement thing that we do. Editors, paid media directors, etc. And there's a couple other ones that are not in here as well. But bottom line, we have this application where all the new applications for any one of those particular roles get zapped in to the respective hiring pipeline. And then what we can do on the back end is just literally sort through and filter through all the applications. We can move them through the process and ultimately take them to a new hire, basically. And if not, we can put them on the bench. The one key thing that makes that scalable to where every day you can just wake up and check the applications of any role that you're hiring for and have a bunch in there is because of the hiring VSL. This does so much of the heavy lifting for you to where almost you could decrease your you'd still have to have an interview, but obviously you could decrease it, how deep you go into the interview, because you could front load all of that work into the hiring VSL to where then you could literally only get qualified applicants. Similar again to the hiring, to the client acquisition VSL. It's a very similar process. And so I'm a big proponent of creating a hiring VSL for any position that you want to hire for. Then in the job post, you just send all of the, when we created this job post here, you just send everyone to the hiring VSL. The hiring VSL does the heavy lifting of disqualifying unqualifieds, disqualifying people who wouldn't be a good fit. And again, further selling the people who are a good fit, who have the same values as what you have, etc. The VSL does all of that heavy lifting, then they apply, then they automatically go into your hiring pipeline, and then you just get a bunch of candidates every single day that you can then sort through and take them through your hiring process. It's the best thing ever, honestly. And the other thing, just quickly before I get into this, every single interview that I've had over the last couple months, they've all mentioned something about our hiring VSL because nobody else does this. And so when it goes back to the idea of, what makes your company different from every other company that they could potentially work for? Remember, A players are in demand. I'm only going to go through this in this one, but A players are in demand. You got to stand out. What makes your company different? Same thing as your client acquisition. And one of the things that we do is the hiring VSL. And everyone mentions something about that in that they say, I couldn't believe how in depth you went. I can't believe, how much you expressed on the front end. I love the fact that you took so much time explaining about the role and this and that and whatever. And so in their mind, subconsciously, whether they think it or not, that's one of the things that makes you different from everybody else. It was one of the attractive points behind your agency or your business in general. What's the other thing as well is that, one of the drivers of any culture, and also one of the drivers of really just any, why do so many people go and work for a particular company? One of those biggest drivers is the person running the company, right? It's the person behind it. And so if they can see on the front end before they've ever spoken to you, that you as the founder are spending 20 or 30 minutes talking about a particular role, all the importances of it, etc., which I'll go into in terms of the content of the video. But bottom line, they can see that you're spending 20, 30 minutes breaking down a particular role. That's going to show them from day one, the first time they've ever interacted with you, that's going to show them the level of detail that you have and the level of attention to detail that you have. And also, if you do it in the right way, the level of passion that you have for your business, for the role itself, if it's account managers or closers or whatever it might be, and also for the vision of the company, right? You can really sell the company, and people can see that. They can feel it in a way that they can't feel it just from a basic job post. So that's why in the job post section, I was going through the idea of, the job post is just to get them to the next stage of the funnel, really. Like, you just want to sell the next step, because the next step, in other words, the hiring VSL, should do all of the heavy lifting for you. All right. So bit of a rant there, but I just really want to express how powerful, important, and impactful this will be on your recruiting for, again, any position, doesn't matter what it is. So probably already said this, similar to a client acquisition VSL, we want to create a hiring VSL which all candidates go through prior to applying. Now, the ad should redirect the candidates to the hiring VSL, which should achieve the following outcomes / answer the following questions. So why should the candidate work with you over all of the other options that they have? So by the nature of a candidate being an A player, they are going to have a lot of other offers and opportunities that they can take. Why should they work with you? This VSL should answer that. What are the benefits? How are you different? When I say benefits, I don't mean like the physical benefits like most people would think when they think about hiring a new employee. I mean, what are the bigger outcomes that they're going to achieve through you? If you can make your team on the back end achieve their goals, they're never going to leave you, right? Layla Hormozi, I think it is, always speaks about create a vision big enough to where your team's vision can fit inside your vision. And so if you can achieve that on the back end, that's amazing. But also, I kind of brush that off. That is like seriously what you want to do. But also, if you can bring that to the front end when you're hiring a new team member, or team members, if you do multiple at a time, if you can bring that to the front and then sell them on the fact that you will be able to achieve your goal, and again, more so show them rather than tell them, because that goes back to the idea of truth versus trust. Don't rely on the market's trust, for them to trust your word, because ultimately they don't know you, they're not going to trust you. Rather, show them the truth behind it, show them like indisputable evidence that they will be able to achieve their vision with you, their goals with you through your company. That's again going to be a huge selling point as to why they should come and work with you, or at least apply to work with you over everyone else. So again, what are the benefits? That's what I'm talking to more specifically on the benefit front. How are you different? Again, what are they going to gain by working with you, which they wouldn't otherwise have gotten? Typically, this speaks to, again, goals and achieving their vision. Where are you at? Where do you want to go? And how does this position play into that growth path? So A players actively want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to know that their job, they want to know that their job and its goals, are directly tied to a bigger outcome. Think back to the one of the previous trainings that I was talking about, the hamster wheel, right? They don't want to feel like they're on a hamster wheel just achieving nothing. They want to realize that I'm doing this work today, and this work is going to impact something way bigger than me, right? So it's important. It's important work, right? They also want to know that they are being relied on. A players love to be relied on. They love responsibility. They love a lot of responsibility put on their shoulders. If they don't deliver, that will affect the overall objective. They like this pressure. Okay, true A players see pressure as a privilege. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Pressure is a privilege, right? And A players see pressure as a privilege. And so show them how this is, again, going to tie into the bigger vision of the company. And also you can show the growth path of the particular vision, of the particular role as well. But this, again, just from speaking to so many people, I've also noticed that this is huge. They want to see where you're at in terms of numbers, in terms of team size, and just company size in general. They want to see that, and they want to see what are your goals, right? Again, that also ties back to the vision idea, right? If your goal is to get to 100K a month and have 30 clients, and you sell that on the front end, that might be what your goal is, and that's totally fine. But you've got to realize you're not going to get someone amazing, some high level talent applying for that role. Why? Because if your vision is only 100K a month and 30 clients and a team of 5, well, high quality talent have a far bigger vision than that. And so their vision cannot fit inside your vision because your vision is only 100K a month. And I keep going back to the revenue number because it's easy and everyone gets it, but it's not always about money, but it is part of it, right? So again, if they want to make 20K a month, they're not going to make 20% of the company. You know what I mean? If they're just an account manager or a closer or whatever it might be, they're not going to do 20% of the company, right? But if they can see that, your vision's only 100K a month, their vision's not going to be able to fit into it. One of the things that I always do, especially in our closer hiring VSLs, is I talk about our vision. Initially, a couple months back, or probably start of the year or so, I was always talking about in my hiring VSLs, $1 million a month. Like that was the big goal, right? Again, about the start of this year, start of this year. $1 million a month. And I got people on the calls saying, I love the goal of $1 million a month. We also talked about volume of clients. So this is actually interesting. I spoke about back then, we was at, I think maybe 60 or 70 clients. And I said by the middle of the year, this was probably 4 months away or 5 months away. We want to be at, I think it was double, like 120 clients. So maybe we was at 50 clients. So you said we wanted to get to 100 clients, whatever it was. I told them the number of clients that we're at and the number of clients that we want to get to, right? So again, where we at, where we want to go. And it was only by the middle of the year. It wasn't like the 5-year plan or whatever. And I cannot tell you how many people on the interview brought that up. Hey, I saw that video was about a month ago because I had the date in the video. They could see that it was a month ago. And they said, I just wanted to, one of my questions is, how are you tracking towards the goal of hitting 100 clients or 120 clients, whatever it was, right? So they want to know, where are you going? What's the goal? What's the growth trajectory of this role as well as the company? And subconsciously, most of the time what they're doing is they're thinking, does my vision fit into this company's vision? And can I achieve my vision through this company? That's what they're asking themselves, and that's what you got to show them. Also, what is your culture and what are your core values? So A players value a lot more than money. They want to know that they will enjoy where they work. They also want to ensure that they are going to be in an environment in which they are not the smartest or highest performer, as that will obviously drive them. Your culture and your core values should reflect this. Here, you want to bring the reality of the position to the front end. This way, you're naturally going to weed out the misfits and you'll attract more qualified candidates. This also decreases any misalignments on expectations. And obviously you can go a lot deeper on expectations and alignment, fit and whatnot in the interview process, but you start that process early. And again, I always talk about the idea of trying as much as possible to bring the reality of the position to the front end, whilst you could, I was going to say whilst still selling the position, but when it comes to selling the position, you don't want to overpromise, because even if you overpromise on the front end, you get somebody amazing that you would have never otherwise have gotten. But if you overpromise and that's not the reality, then at some point they're going to realize when they come on board, oh, you're not as big as what you said you were, or you don't have this going on. So, it's like, yeah, right now you might get that high quality person, but they're eventually going to figure out, oh, you were actually lying or it wasn't the truth or whatever it is. So then eventually going to churn on the back end anyway. So you never really want to do that. But again, if you bring the reality of the position to the front end, that's going to attract more people who are, oh, I love this, right? For example, one of our big things is always, you've probably heard me talk about this before, client experience. And one of the biggest pillars to client experience is communication, and more specifically, quality of response and speed of response, because that basically equals good client communication. And so in my account manager, hiring VSLs, which again, side note, you can see the examples down here. In my account manager VSLs, I always stress the fact of client experience, client results, client experience, client results. I always talk about that. And so somebody who's just maybe just not that interested, or more so just cares about advertising or the back end of running ads and marketing in general, but not the client side, they're never going to work out. And so that, by me really stressing that in the VSL, that's going to turn them off. It's not going to sell them. But somebody who's a really good fit for what we need particularly, and they see that, one of our top account managers, I distinctly remember in his interview with me, he said this one line and it stuck with me for a very long time. He said, I felt like you wrote this position for me. And he was saying that based on the hiring VSL, because on the hiring VSL I had a written doc. And he said, I felt like you just created it for me in particular. So when I was talking about the reality of the position in the hiring VSL with that particular account manager, who by the way is now one of our top account managers. So he's lasted for probably 9 months at this point. So he's been an amazing hire for us. When he watched the hiring VSL, he got deeper. He was attracted to the role even more so. It sold him even more by the very nature of me bringing the reality of the position to the front end. So that's again a real life example of how this plays out. Let me just sort this out quick. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, what does the career path look like? Obviously, what's the compensation? Now, an A player's worst nightmare is a quote dead end job. The inability to see a growth path in front of them kills A players. Okay, now if that's the case, they'll leave you, or they just won't apply in the first place if they feel as though, if they get the feeling that this is really not going anywhere, or this again doesn't, the vision of this company isn't going to allow me to achieve my own vision. Now, you must highlight the growth opportunities that they have by working with you. This comes in the form of promotion, so monetary and status, and also in the form of increased learning, ability to work with amazing clients and or team, etc. So again, it really just goes back to selling the opportunity, right? So where possible, always use performance-based compensation because it's highly attractive to A players. They want to eat what they kill. They like being responsible for their goals, and they want to be recognized and compensated based on their performance and the outcomes that they generate. In other words, a lot of A players want a meritocracy to where it doesn't matter who they are, where they've come from, what their background is, or anything like that. They just want to get compensated and recognized based on their performance. That is like an A player's dream. And if they can do that in amongst a team that is also of the same, makeup of them in terms of A player, in terms of, them having A player tendencies as well, they're great talent, etc. They can learn a lot, etc. That is exactly what A players want. And so again, if you have that, show that on the front end because that's going to sell A players. And this is the other thing, it's also going to push away the guys who just want a cushy job. Because if it's performance based, and again on compensation specifically of certain roles, don't worry about the specifics of that. We go through that deeper in later trainings. But just very quickly here, if it is a performance-based type position, if it is a meritocracy that you have at your company, then people who are not good fits, people who are B players or C players and want cushy roles, they are not going to be attracted by it, because if they don't perform, they don't get paid. Like, it's as simple as that. So A players love that, B and C players don't. And so again, that's where that hiring VSL creates that diversion on the front end. It sells people, attracts them deeper, makes them apply, which is the next training I'll get into, and then it pushes away everyone else. It's like the best thing ever. So that is the outcomes of what you want your hiring VSL to achieve. Now, the way in which you achieve those outcomes really doesn't matter, but I do think I've linked some examples here. Right now, at the point of recording, there's only one. But I'm going to link some others down here as well that I've got, and also some new ones that I'm creating for some roles. You know, believe it or not, we actually do this ourselves because it works. So I'll link these, because I do think the best way for you to see how this looks, obviously in reality, is instead of me just telling you, like, I want to show you the outcomes it should produce, but I also just want to show you it in reality, because again, we use them, and all of the ones I'll link here have a generated our current team, which our current team I'll put up against anyone else. Like, we've got some amazingly talented people, and they've all come through one of these VSLs depending on their department. So they work, is my point, and I want you to watch them so you can kind of mirror that, take what I've done and mirror it for your own business. And again, as I always say, any help you need on this, any questions you have, if you want us to review one of your hiring VSLs or help you create it, whatever it needs to be, just hit up your account manager. We're more than happy to help. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next training where we're going to go through the application. All right, so in this one, we're going to go through the application. Now, the application for your hiring process is the exact same as the application for your client acquisition process. As I'm sure you see in the theme now throughout, talent acquisition is the exact same thing as client acquisition. So the hiring VSL, just like a normal VSL, needs to drive all qualified applicants to fill out an application form, which should be linked right below the video. So you just literally, I can show you an example. All right, so here's an example for an account manager. Literally same thing, VSL is on the page, apply here. And then the apply here just pops up the Typeform application itself. Now, in the application itself, you want to be making sure that you're asking questions that show you work history, career fit, goals, and value alignment. You'll see that there's a theme within the interview. We also go deeper into, which I'll show you later in terms of the interview structure. We go a lot deeper on the interview into these things, but the application should just give you a small insight into these things and see if it actually aligns with, more specifically, as I'll get onto, the scorecard. All right, so like, just for now, that's really what you want to be asking questions relating to: work history, career fit, goals, and value alignment. Now, also, you can do a 2 to 5 minute task as well. So within every application, I personally include a 2 to 5 minute task, which helps eliminate the obvious time wasters / people who aren't qualified. Very similar to how we want to structure the application for our client acquisition, in terms of asking specific questions to identify or bring to the surface the guys who are not serious, maybe aren't qualified, don't fit, whatever. Same thing here. And one of the things you can do with your talent acquisition applications is you can actually just tell them, hey, do this task for me. And then that, again, is going to weed out the guys who are not serious or whatever it might be. You want to, with the task specifically, make it related to the job role and make it quite broad in terms of the inputs that you give. So don't say exactly step by step what you want the candidate to do, rather keep it broad. So for an example, this is actually one that I've used, is send me a Loom video walking through how you scaled the last client that you worked with. Super broad. It's obviously relating to the role if this was like an account manager role or a paid media director role, but I'm not saying, hey, write this piece of ad copy in this way, do this, do this, do this, do this. Why? Because I want to just get a feel of how do they react to that and what do they send me, right? Because they can't reach out to me and ask me questions. And if they did, that wouldn't be a great sign, because it means that they keep, within reason, on the back end, they're always going to be asking you questions before, they can't do anything off their own back, right? They need to try and figure out every individual little detail and be told everything to be able to do the job. We don't want that. And so again, not only does that kind of, the people who have a lot of initiative and drive and whatever else, they'll just kind of figure it out on their own. And then again, as I said before, you'll actually be able to see the task itself. So they'll send you a Loom video. If you ask them this, they'll send you a Loom video, and then you'll be able to see, well, how long is the Loom video? How much detail are they putting in? How, are they like I am right now, like into it, what they're doing? Or are they just like, yeah, so we did this and we did that. And, you can kind of gauge energy and passion is the word I'm looking for. And again, it's only going to be a 2 to 5 minute video. It's not going to be something that you'll be able to say, yes, this is the person I'm hiring, but it gives you a good feel at least. And especially if you're generating a lot of applications, which you should be doing, as I said in one of the previous trainings, ideally you want 50 to 100 applicants per role that you hire for. You want to have some mechanisms that allow you to just filter out the real, like, bottom 10% terrible people that are just never going to be a good fit. This is one of them. The other thing you can do, and this is what I personally do, is you can add in the word optional to the question to see who goes above and beyond, or you can make it required. Now, I've had mixed results with this. Some people who don't do it are a great fit still. One of our top account managers right now actually never sent through one of the, he never sent through the task because I said optional, right? And I didn't make it required to fill out in order to submit the application. But in those instances, if they don't do it, you want to make sure that the rest of their application looks amazing. And if it doesn't, if that looks kind of iffy, and they also don't do the task, if you say it's optional, then that's somebody that I would just, write off. But this particular account manager I'm referring to that actually didn't do this, the rest of his application, I was like, oh my God, even if they don't work out, I need to just speak to this person because they had so much experience. Some of the places that they worked in the past, I was like, damn, that's crazy. And I could just tell that they had, they were very much in alignment with the scorecard that I created for that position when I created it. So, bottom line, here are a few examples of applications that you can just basically copy. So I tried to include majority of the roles, right? Account managers and closers, and then also like a paid media director. Now, I will say, just open up this doc and see these for yourself. I do just want to walk through though. I've actually got it open here, the paid media director one as an example. So, obviously, what's your full name? Basic stuff, what's your email address? And this is the same for every single position. And again, you can see the other positions just by clicking the doc below and you'll be able to check them out. Link to Facebook and Instagram. I'll just do that actually for now. Time zone. This is obviously important, particularly for closers and account managers. Are you available full time? After watching the video, what exactly interests you about becoming a paid media director at scoreclients.io and why? So this obviously ties into making sure that they actually watched the VSL itself, the hiring VSL, and obviously kind of start to feel on alignment, right? And do they align with the position, etc. What experience do you have that best relates to the paid media director role as explained in the video? So I'm always tying back to that video to make sure that you actually watched it because that video should attract people who are qualified and it should push away people who are not qualified. And obviously here as well, you now start to get a feel on experience. So again, remember that the application needs to speak to work history, career fit, goals, and value alignment. So that question there in particular is speaking to work history. The one before, I don't think I can. This one here, what exactly interests you about the role? That kind of speaks to value alignment, right? What are your goals? Obviously that speaks to goals. Both income and non-income, right? What's your motivation to become what's your deeper motivation to become the best marketer? Looking back on your career so far, tell us 1 to 3 of your top achievements. Also, what were some of your biggest failures and learned lessons? This is kind of speaking to career fit. Career fit is also a mixture though, I would say, between all the questions. You can just kind of get a feel after all the questions around career fit. And is this something that's in alignment with, potentially what they're looking for moving forward? And then this is that optional question I just said. So I say optional, please create a Loom video for scoreclients.io. I always say this. I also say this, I should say, for scoreclients.io, like for your company, because what I found in the early days when I didn't add this in, quite a handful of people, or especially closers particularly, they had like a pitch video that they just sent out to every application they applied for. And you can see on Loom or wherever that, and you can just tell by the video itself that it wasn't made for you specifically. So I always say for scoreclients.io, because then if they send me a video and it's not for scale clients, I can see that their attention to detail is not the best because I specifically say for scoreclients.io, right? So please create a Loom video walking through the scaling process you took at a previous company/offer, both inside and outside of the ad account. So again, see how broad that is? It's like, what does that actually mean? Well, it means, just take me through the scaling process that you implemented on. And then the rest is kind of up to interpretation to the person who's applying. So then I can get an insight into how deep they go. Do they ask clarifying questions or do they just do it themselves? And what is their thought process? And what do they default to, right? How do they think? I'm kind of getting an insight into how they're thinking, right? And then I believe, who are your last 2 to 3 bosses? How would they rate or describe you when we speak to them? That's an important distinction. When we speak to them, how would they rate or describe you? And then if accepted, how soon can you get started? That's it. All right. So couple things on what to look for in submission. So you're looking for alignment between the candidate through their answers and the mission of the role, key outcomes and key competencies, which are highlighted obviously on the position scorecard. Again, this is why we start with the scorecard, because you're going to be evaluating all of these applications against the scorecard that you created. You also want to see alignment between the answers and your core values for your company overall as well. Now, it's unlikely, this is an important distinction, it's unlikely that you'll feel 100% certain about any particular candidate just from their application. So if you don't feel 100% certain, that's normal, right? You shouldn't most of the time. However, if you get a sense of alignment, that's enough to move the candidate to the next stage of the hiring process. More so, I would say what you're looking for is more so bad fits rather than good fits from the application. Meaning, who are the guys who are just obviously not a good fit? That's more so what you're looking for. And then everyone else, you just want to push to an interview. Again, because it's very difficult, at least I found in my experience, it's very difficult to go, this is the person, or I feel really good about this person, only from an application. And like I also said, there is some instances where, you know, the application is good, but they might not do the task, right? And in our instance, one of our top account managers never did the task, but he's turned out to be unbelievably amazing, right? So, you know, it's more so just who are the guys who are obvious, oh my God, that was terrible, right? Or the, you know, for example, you need somebody experienced, but they say, this is, you know, I'm interested in learning how to run ads and whatever else. It's like, okay, obviously just DQ, right? So again, you're looking for more so bad fits rather than necessarily good fits from the application. However, some intangibles to look for as well is initiative. So are they going above and beyond what you asked? You know, in I think I also say depth of answers. Yeah, there you go. In-depth answers, which kind of ties into initiative. When they say, you know, here, looking back on your career so far, what, you know, 1 to 3 top achievements, and they say, oh, you know, something ridiculous, like I made money, or like, you know, whatever. You can just tell the depth isn't there. Well, that's going to show me that, you know, they're an obvious bad fit. And again, that's more so what we're looking for. Knowledge in alignment with the position. So using the example I used before, if they're saying, I would love to learn this or whatever, obviously not a good fit. Also, when you ask about, I really like this question. This one. What experience do you have that best relates to the paid media director role? As explained in the video. When they detail their experience, they detail their work history, that's going to give you a great insight into their knowledge in alignment with the position. Complete transparency. So are they, you know, being clear and upfront with you? Are they, you know, potentially mentioning some of their flaws in their application? That's always a good sign. They're not trying to, you know, hype themselves up too much and, you know, not lying, but, you know, like only talking about their amazing things. I actually like people who talk about the flaws because everyone's got them. No bad talk. This is really important. No bad talk about past positions or bosses. So if they're like kind of, you know, saying, oh yeah, that boss, oh, they weren't good because they always did this and that, that shows me that someone who doesn't take control of their own actions. And that's really important for obviously any position, that, you know, these people are actually, they hold themselves accountable. And even if it was somebody else that was a problem or whatever, they're always going to look inwards before they look outwards, as I say down here, right? They take responsibility for their own actions when referring to previous positions or failures, etc. They're looking inwards before they look outwards. And that's one of our core values for our company, which is looking inwards before we look outwards, meaning, okay, yes, maybe this person could have done better, but okay, aside from the point, what could have I done better, right? We have this with closers. With closers, it's primarily based on prospects. Yeah, you didn't get the close. Yeah, that prospect was more difficult to handle, but what could have you done better in that instance? Look inwards before we look outwards. Same thing with account managers and clients. Client doesn't get the result. Okay, that's not good. And maybe the client could have done more on their end, but forget that. What could have we done better? How could have we improved, right? And that goes into all asset or aspects of the agency, whether it comes to building the fulfillment conveyor belt, hiring the team, etc. I'm always looking inwards before we look outwards. And I want to kind of, again, you're not going to be like, this person takes full responsibility based on an application, because it's only a small insight into a person, but it's going to give you a feel. You're going to get a feel for it. And that's, again, what we're looking for. Obviously, you know, clean socials that also align with their answers. If they're talking about, you know, all this amazing stuff, you go into their socials and they're drinking every weekend and the whatever, well, there's not a lot of alignment there. And maybe that could bleed into they're not being overly transparent. All right. So tech/backend. So actually quickly just on what to look for. Again, I think the biggest takeaway here is more so this than anything else. You're looking more so for bad fits than you are perfect fits, because I just don't want you to feel as though, oh, all of these applicants are really bad just based from the application, because you don't feel as though any one of them is perfect. It's like, you're not going to get that just from the application. So the tech in the back end for applications. So we use Typeform, as you can see here. This is obviously a Typeform, and then again we just embed it into below the VSL like that. We use Typeform upon a candidate, and upon a candidate submitting their application, they get redirected to this page right here, which is very similar to the thank you page for your client acquisition. Again, it's the same thing. I know I keep talking about that, but it is the same thing. So this is basically the thank you page, and you can just go to scaleclients.io/submitted. This is the thank you page for our application. So thank you for submitting your application. Please watch the short video below for next steps. And then in this video, I'm basically just hyping them up on a couple of client results, really what we do, and then I also go through our core values. And again, it's kind of acting as that polarizing video between I want to push the people away who wouldn't be a good fit here. I want to show them before we reach out and ask for an interview or whatever. I want to show them that this is probably not for you. And then the people who are qualified, who their values do align with ours, I also want to sell those guys. I want to get those guys deeper in by showing them that actually this is probably one of the best positions that they could work with, and one of the best companies they could work with, because we optimize so much for client results, which is so rare in our space, and that's again our number one core value. And so I go through a couple of things of that nature as well in this video. And essentially I just, basically the CTA for the video is, if your application looks good, we'll reach out. So in so many words, but I'm starting that process of setting expectations, which you'll see in the interview process and the onboarding and ramping process of anyone you bring on board. Setting those expectations is super, super, super important. And it's actually one of the keys to getting making successful hires, is being clear on the front end about the reality of any of the positions that you bring on board. And this is just another one of those instances. So you can go to, as I say, scaleclients.io/submitted and watch this video if you're interested. Now from there, all the applications that are submitted get zapped, which I give you the exact zap integration that we use for that here. So they get zapped into our recruiting pipeline inside of Asana, which has the following stages, but I'm actually just going to show you it here. Sorry, here. So this is an example. Obviously I didn't want to show a live one, but we have different pipelines for different positions. So editors, paid media directors, setter and closers, and then also account managers. And basically every single hiring pipeline looks as follows. So you have the applications. This is where this zap here, when somebody submits their application, it always gets zapped into this column right here. So all the applications come into here. This is where you then obviously want to go through, review each application, etc. Then the good ones, you move across. So essentially it would look like this. So it'd zap in, look like that. You'd open up the card. This is obviously all automatic. And then we have some like automations here, but essentially in the description of the card, this is where their answers to these questions get zapped in. So like it would say, what experience? It would look like this basically. And that zap, does it for you. So it's like this is always bolded, and then it's basically answer. And then it's like the next question, right? Again, all automated through that zap. We don't manually do any of that. So then I can just literally open up any one of those recruiting pipelines. And because we're always recruiting, I can just always open them up. And there's always going to be new applications in here. I can just open them up, check them out. Yeah, this guy actually looks really good. Okay, great. Then I would just move that person across. We do have an automation that's automatically, when we move people across, the request, RFI is basically request for interview, which is just a simple email. Let me actually show you the email. Super basic, right? This is actually one of our account managers now, but this is the email that we sent to him way back when. So, hi, name. Thanks for your application. We've reviewed your application and are interested in moving forward with an interview. You can book a call with me here. Thanks. I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon. Super basic. This just links to a calendar. Done. And so that automatically sends when we move people from the applications into here. But again, if you don't have that automation set up, just manually send that email, no problem. Okay, great. Then with the request for interview, when they book in a call, again, we have an automation set up to where when they book in, they then automatically get moved into the MBI interview, which is the first interview process, which we'll go through in the next trainings here. But again, if you don't have the automation set up, no problem, just manually move them into this. Then you have your MBI interview, which again, I'll go through exactly how that's structured in one of the next trainings. But that's the first interview we always have, it's called MBI interview. Then based on that initial interview, if they are a good fit and you like them, whatever, great. Then you would move them into the role specific task, which again, we'll be going through all of that and how this is structured. Go through that, that's sent, great. Once you get it back from them, you go into role-specific task received. You review it. If it looks good, again, you then move them into the scorecard interview, which is the second interview in our process. We'll be going through all of that. Then based on the scorecard interview, then that's when you'll make the offer. Obviously, if they get to this stage, offer made, great. And then if they accept it, they'll go into onboarding and ramp. And then that's basically, they'll go into onboarding and ramp, and they'll be on the team at that point. Great. Then obviously at any point that, maybe you have the scorecard interview, but you don't need somebody right now, or maybe they're a good fit, but you've got someone better for right now. Well, those good people who you don't end up hiring, you would then always want to move them into the bench. So this way, again, if you look at some of our recruiting pipelines here, in any one of these that we go into, we've got probably 20 to 50, depending on the role, of people in the bench that I've interviewed in the past. They were really good, but for whatever reason, we just didn't hire them. Maybe it wasn't the right timing, whatever it might be, 101 different reasons why, but they are a good potential fit. So then I always put them into the bench here, which is just this column. And then when we need a new account manager, I'll always hit up our bench first. And then obviously I'm always recruiting, so we've always got new people coming into the pipeline, but I'm always going to hit up the bench first, test the waters with the people who are in there. Maybe we could get back on another call, do another interview, see where we're at, see if there's an alignment, etc. And then basically just bring them back through this process. But again, you've got a bench, so you can just go straight there as opposed to starting the whole recruiting process again. That's why you always want to build a bench of qualified candidates. And then obviously the people throughout, in the applications, if the application just looks terrible or whatever, or maybe you have an initial interview and you're like, whoa, I misjudged that massively. It happens all the time. So if that's the case and you're like, this person's never going to be a good fit, no problem. You would then obviously just want to move them into the DQ column, and that's pretty much it. But hopefully you're now starting to get a sense of how I've structured this process so that it's scalable. Again, like scalable client acquisition, one of the biggest constraints that will come as you scale the agency or coaching business or whatever, is acquiring new talent at scale and onboarding and ramping them efficiently and in an effective manner, so that you can actually keep up with the volume of clients and the volume that you're doing on the front end. And so this is one of the best funnels, really, if you want to call it that, one of the best funnels that I've found. Again, you just continuously do your job posting, etc., advertising the roles, sending them to the hiring VSL like we went through. All of those guys automatically go through that. They automatically get qualified or disqualified based on how they are and whatnot, based on the position, etc. They automatically all go through and apply for the position. And then all you really need to monitor is just this application column, and then you just move them through, and then ultimately take them all the way down, obviously, to onboarding and ramping the guys who are good, and you just DQ everyone else. Like, it's really not the most difficult process once you get this set up. So that's how the application structure is done. And as I say, once they're in our pipeline, inside our pipeline, I then review all applications and move them along based on their answers and set up interviews with those that look promising, or at least, again, the ones who don't look bad. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense. In the next one, I'm going to go through the structured interview process, and we'll start going through how we actually interview candidates, all that good stuff. So any questions on this, let us know, and I'll see you in the next round. So welcome to the structured interview process. Now, a couple important points about these next couple videos here, where we're going through the actual interview, what questions to ask, etc. Is number one, you got to make sure that you have, I mentioned it here, at least 20 plus interviews. Ideally, again, if it's more of a specific role, like a paid media director or a CMO, like a very non-common role, right? It's harder to hire for a position. You don't need 20, naturally. Maybe you could get away with sort of 10. But if it's any kind of common role, closers, setters, account managers, operations people, CSMs, client success managers, etc., any type of common role like that, you gotta have 20 plus interviews. Reason being is because it doesn't matter how good your interview process is if you're only speaking with 3 or 5 people. Because guess what? If it's only 3 people, you might just have 3 bad candidates. Like, you just might. And so then at that point, yes, you might pick the best of the 3, but guess what? The best of the 3 is still not good. So it doesn't matter what interview process you use, what questions you ask them, if it's just 3 naturally bad people, right? So you need to make sure, as I say here, once you've sourced 50 to 100 candidates, you then need to make sure that you identify 20 plus who, based on their application, seem promising enough to have a conversation with, again, based on their application that we went through in the previous training, right? And then what you can do is take those 20 people and conduct a set of structured interviews to be able to narrow down that 20 down to 1 to 5 true A players. Okay, just wanted to mention again on the volume and the importance of having more than what most people do, which is like they speak to 3 people and then pick the best of the 3. And it's just like, you're never going to make a good decision if that is what you do. Okay. Now, on the topic of the interviews, the interview process that I highly recommend is the following. Now, just quickly on this interview process, this is by far the best interview process that I've tried. I've tried so many different lines of questioning, different calls for different things. I've tried so much. And this is by far the best structure that I've ever found because it truly identifies key A players independent of how good people interview. Because one of the problems with a lot of interview processes, and you may have found this yourself, is that a lot of them only highlight the people who are good at interviewing, because interviewing is a skill. However, I mentioned this a bit later on, but true A players, a lot of A players are not good at interviewing. Because of whatever reason, it might be because they're nervous, whatever it is. They're just not good at interviewing. Or maybe they're not good at thinking on the spot. Now, could you argue that thinking on the spot is a skill that you'd want to hire for? Yes, but I do think that people put a lot of pressure on themselves when it comes to interviewing because, in a lot of cases, it's like, whatever I say in this interview is going to determine if I get the job of my dreams or not, like in a way. And so if they're showing up to the call in that way, then naturally they're not going to perform because they're putting so much pressure on themselves. So you've got to find process or an interview process. Well, what I was always looking for was an interview process that identifies A players independent of interview skills. And this does that so well. And so I really recommend this process. Essentially, we'll get into it. This probably means nothing to you right now, but how it's structured is you have an MBI interview, then you have a role specific task, then you have a second interview, which is called the scorecard interview, then you make an offer. And so at each stage, your goal is to disqualify candidates who don't align with your scorecard so that by the end of the interview process, that you are left with 1 to 5 perfect candidates who you make an offer to. That's really the goal of the interview process. And that's also how I look at it. I'm looking to disqualify non-A players, not necessarily find A players. I think that's also another part of another thing that I do that allows me to, again, find really good people independent of their interview process. I'm not necessarily looking for A players. I'm looking for people who are clearly not A players. And that goes back to a whole idea of, just in general, if you want to do something, oftentimes you don't know exactly what it is that you need to do to get that goal, but you know what you shouldn't be doing that's going to take away from the goal. So just don't do those things that you know is going to take away from the goal. And then by extension, you're kind of left with the actions that are almost, going to make it unnecessary for you to not hit the goal. Same idea applies here. All right. So with that being said, this training here is going to go through the MBI interview structure, which is the first interview of the process. Now, the MBI interview structure I pulled from a book called, believe it or not, MBI, Motivation-Based Interviewing, and it's a great book. This is basically me. I've devoured the book. Again, it's one of the best books I've read on interviewing specifically, and I basically brought out what's most prevalent, most useful, most relevant for us in our industry, hiring for agencies, coaches, etc. And this is it right here. And again, this is a process that I've used and battle tested, and it works tremendously well. So just want to give credit where credit's due. All right, let's jump into it. So the MBI interview structure. This will be a call. So this is actually obviously on the call. This will last about 45 minutes or so, depending on how talkative the candidate is. But you always want to start off the interview with relaxing the candidate. So this also ties into the idea of, not being reliant on making your decision based on candidates who have the best interview skills, because at the end of the day, once they've got the job, interview skills are not useful whatsoever. So you want to always start with relaxing the candidate, making them feel as though it's a comfortable environment. They can kind of express themselves without too much, judgment, etc. So, once you see signs that they are settling in, I should say, it's then time to move on to work history and education, which is the next part. But the time it takes to relax a candidate can take a few minutes, all the way to 10 minutes or more, depending on the candidate's comfort level. So don't mistake, this is what I was saying before, the most confident candidate as the best for the job. Okay, high performers can still show up to interviews extremely nervous. I remember one of our top account managers specifically. Closers are naturally always confident because they're just used to those environments. So you'll find that. But with account managers specifically, one of our top account managers, he in the interview, I didn't hire him first. This is also interesting. He was on our bench. So this is why it's so important to build a bench, because he didn't, and this was a while ago. So I was kind of naturally letting how well people interview influence my decision on who the best fit is for the role. He didn't interview that well, and he was very soft-spoken. He was very non-confident. He was very answered the question, and that was it. There was no extra context given. There was nothing else. He was just like, how are you? Good. You? Good. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like that. But that also bled into actual interview questions I was asking him. And I was just like, I just don't have that feeling that he was that great. It was because he didn't interview well. Anyway, long story short, ended up bringing him on board. One of the best account managers that we've got right now, one of our top account managers. And so he wasn't confident on the interview, but didn't mean to say he was an A player. He wasn't an A player. Okay. As I say, high performers can still show up to the interview extremely nervous. So the goal is always hiring the candidate who's best for the job, not who's the best at interviewing. Really important. So basically how you do this is just start out with small talk, about where they're based, their family, open up slightly about yourself. Because if you open up about yourself, that's going to then create an environment in which the candidate feels as though it's okay to open up as well. And that's what you want, because that's also how they're going to, basically relax themselves. If they're just talking about their kids, their wife, their husband, their this, their that, whatever, they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable. And that, again, is the goal of the first part of the interview. So make sure that you have a genuine smile, okay, and maintain eye contact with the candidate at all times, even if it's on Zoom. Don't be, as I'm looking at you right now, don't be like kind of, yeah, okay, cool, kind of looking away and whatnot. Keep eye contact as much as you can on Zoom. And also don't appear distracted or make them feel you have other things on your mind that are more important than them. You want to explain the interview format and mention that if they have any questions, to leave them for the end. If you're somebody like I am who takes notes, make sure you let them know I'm going to be taking notes. So if you see me looking off to the side, I'm taking notes. That's also going to tie into the idea of them not feeling as though you're distracted. Because if you don't tell them that and you're just like this the whole time, yep. You know what I mean? They're going to feel like there's something over here that's more important than them. And that's also going to make them just feel uncomfortable, which again, you do not want them to feel uncomfortable. So that's the first usually 5 minutes, depending again on how talkative the candidate is. It can go up to 10 minutes of the interview. Then from there, you want to switch straight into work history and education, which is the first section of the proper interview, if you want to call it that. So once you've elected a candidate, gradually move into their work history and more specifically their last 3 jobs or the previous 10 years, starting with the oldest and move through to today. Okay. So basically here, if they've had 3 jobs within the last 10 years, you want to detail the last 3 jobs, right? Or if they've not and they've only had 1 job, then you want to detail their tenure during that last 10 years at that 1 job. Where did they start? Where did they move up to, etc. You want to detail that ideally growth trajectory. Okay. So make sure to dive deep on specific dates of leaving/starting certain positions to see any quote off time that they may have had and what they got up to. If you notice that they left 1 job on 2019 January and then they started their next job 2019 August, then you want to make sure that you dive deep into, well, what happened between January and August? Why was there such a delay, right? The first reason a candidate will give you as to why they left a job, this is also you want to get clear on, why did you leave? Why did you start this job? Get specific, as you'll see later on in this structure. One of the most key words for an interviewer to use is specific. Like, tell me a specific time when, or what specifically made you leave that job and start the next job. You want to get clear on those specifics. But on that idea of leaving jobs, etc., the first reason a candidate will give you as to why they left a job is commonly generic all the time. They won't tell you the exact reason. They're going to tell, oh, I just had more advanced opportunity, or it was a position that I could make more money at, whatever it is. It's always broad. So you want to go specific. If you look closer and notice that the candidate has the same job title and the same or lower salary, then something doesn't add up. Very rarely do people move jobs, move positions for the same money and or role title. It's very, very common, right? And so by extension, you never want to accept their first answer. They're hoping you'll skip over it, especially if they're trying to hide a termination due to poor performance. Nobody's going to hold up a sign and help you out as an interviewer, right? This is really important. No one's going to hold up a sign and help you out. No one's going to come forthright and tell you, yep, I got fired from this job because of XYZ reason. They're not going to tell you that. So you need to, they're not going to tell you or inform you if you miss something. If you just glaze over something and you go, oh, okay, no problem. Well, what about this? They're not going to take you back to that initial job or whatever it is that you're talking about and say, actually, no, you missed this. And it's something negative about them. They're never going to tell you, like hold up a sign and tell you. So it's your responsibility to be a sharp investigator and dig deeper when necessary. And so you always want to probe, dig deeper. Well, tell me more about that. What actually happened? Tell me specifically here, this, that, whatever. Who was your manager? What did they say? Always get specific on their roles. And so also make sure to get extremely clear on their performance at each job as well. For example, with a closer, for example, you want to get clear on what product did you sell? Who was the prospect? How many units per month did you sell? At what price point? What was your close rate? Gotcha. So and then based on what they're telling you, you want to also imply how much they were generating in a closer example. Gotcha. So you generated about 100K a month in revenue, average commission. How many sales sets did you make, etc. You want to get clear. See how specific I'm going. Just like advertising, specificity is key in interviewing to, again, find the true A players, identify true A players. And what's also key is that if they can't answer these questions, you know that there's something not going on right? Because if any closer, as an example, based on this, any closer always knows their numbers. Like you ask any one of our closers, they'll know their numbers. You ask any one of our closers' previous positions, what were you closing at? What was the product? What was your average commission? What was this? They'll always know, or at least they'll go, yeah, look, roughly it was about 33%, or is in terms of close rate or whatever it might be. But they'll never be stumped, as in like they'll never be like that. You know what I mean? Because they just know their numbers. Whereas somebody who's trying to fake it or whatever, or try and make up numbers, that's why also it's good to imply, totals as well. So if it's like, we have a 10K, I was saying on a 10K product. Okay, gotcha. What was your close rate? And how many calls did you take a month? We took 100 calls a month, 10K product. Okay, gotcha. And you were closing at 10%. Easy numbers because I can't do quick math. Oh no, 25%. Okay, so you close at 25%, 100 calls a month, 10K product. Yeah, so you're doing about 250 a month in revenue, right? They can't make up a lie by, they could tell you, yes, I generated 350K in revenue. And that could be a lie, right? They could just tell you that, but they won't be able to, you could even, ask for their commission first, then ask for the call volume, ask for the price point, ask for the close rate, and then you can tie it back to the commission. Does that actually make sense? Because people can't lie on the fly like that. Does that make sense? And it's not that you're assuming that everyone's lying, but you do want to make sure that you're getting clear on the numbers. You know what I mean? Because oftentimes people can just say, yeah, I was, closing at 50%. It's like, well, were you actually, you want to identify that. So in this section, essentially, I'm not giving you exact questions to ask because it is going to be quite contextual to the candidate you're speaking with. The bigger thing is you just want to get clear, again, on their last 3 jobs. Where were they working? What was their role? What were their key responsibilities? When did they leave? When did they start the next job, etc. You want to get clear on those things. How did they perform in the role? Again, if it's a closer, you want to follow up with these specific questions, etc. You just want to get clear, get a good context, get a good feel of where they've been at over the last 3 jobs, or in other words, over the last 10 years of their career. And again, get clear on each role and see, is there an upward trajectory in their movements? Are they moving upwards, right? And so on that idea, what to look for from this section. The biggest thing you want to see here is just an upward trend in moves that the candidate has made. Either increase in pay at each job, increase in status, increase in role title, etc., increase in responsibility. Did they go from, maybe they're making the same amount, but they actually went from, doing the thing in one position to being the manager in another position? That is an increase. Even though it's the same pay, they're still moving up, you know what I mean? Because they've got more responsibility. And the reason why is because an object that stays in motion, an object in motion stays in motion. If a candidate has been consistently moving up in their career, they are likely to continue an upward motion. The same is true for a downward trend. If they're moving down in their career, they're not now automatically going to just spike up, right? If they've, over the last 10 years, been slowly moving down. Some other things to look for are, of course, ensuring that their career up until today aligns with the outcomes that you want to see this hire achieve based on the scorecard. So tying this back to the scorecard, have they been achieving the same or similar outcomes to what you're needing, right? Again, for a closer, if a closer historically has always generated 100K a month in new revenue for the company that they've been working with, but on your scorecard, you've got, they need to generate minimum 375, like our scorecard is 375 a month in new revenue. Like it just doesn't align, right? And they're not automatically going to be able to just start immediately producing 375 a month in new revenue, closing at XYZ%, etc. if they've never even touched or even, of course people can get better over time. That's not what I'm saying. But if somebody's comfortable over the last 10 years, has been consistently generating 100K a month, that's what they believe to be possible. And then you're asking for 4x that. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes that's a red flag. Additionally, you do not want to see any abrupt changes in their career, either short tenures or drastic switches in industry. If you do see this, you must question and investigate, because what this can oftentimes mean, especially on short tenures, is fired, right? Because of poor performance or whatever, maybe they just didn't fit, whatever it might be. You need to question and investigate that. And then also, if they had an abrupt switch in industries, what that can also tell you is that they are always in the mindset of the grass is greener on the other side. Not necessarily always, but some people can think that. Whereas if they've been in one industry for 10 years, that's a good sign. Obviously, if you're in the same industry as what they've been in for 10 years, that's a great sign. You know what I mean? But if they've, consistently switching and it's short 10 years and they're switching industries and switching roles and switching this and switching that, that's not a good sign. Now this goes without saying, but obviously anything that they can't explain as well is a red flag, and or if they don't know their numbers, again, usually it's a sign that they're lying. So that's what you're looking for in this first section, well, the second section, which is work history and education. The biggest thing here as well, just quickly, is making sure as well, as I said before, that it aligns with your scorecard. This is why you got to create the scorecard before you do any interviews. All right, number 3, skill specific and locus of control questions. So what we're trying to find with these questions is a candidate's locus of control. Do they put responsibility, blame, and control onto things other than, or in other words, outside of themselves? Or do they think they themselves are in complete control over the outcomes of their life? In other words, how a candidate responds to adversity will determine their locus of control. This is what separates high performers from low performers. Whenever low performers encounter an obstacle, or in other words, adversity, they believe there is no way to overcome it. They go, oh, well, that's it. Like, I can't do anything more. That's it. Had this problem, can't do anything about it. Or got this problem, I'll have to give that to the, you as the founder or the manager, whatever it might be. You'll have to handle it, whatever. We don't want that, obviously. And the exact opposite is true for high performers. They go, okay, I've got a problem. That kind of lights a fire underneath them. They're kind of, all right, let's go for it, right? I can figure this out, like whatever. That's just their mindset. And so you want to interview for those things. Again, this is where it's the idea of coachable and teachable skills are important to have, but not as important as the things that are not necessarily as coachable or teachable. This all relates, as you'll see in a minute here, it all relates to attitude. You can't teach attitude, or at least it's very, very, very difficult to, and it's a very long process to teach things like attitude and what is their natural instinct. Do they look at a problem and go, let's figure it out? Or do they look at a problem and go, oh, well, that's the stuff you want to be interviewing for, because really that's the stuff you can't teach. Again, or you might argue you could, but it's a lot more difficult to teach it. And so instead you want to just hire those people and then just teach, if they are a little bit, not as advanced at Facebook ads or CRO, whatever it is that you do for your clients. If it was an account manager type person, you can kind of just teach how to run an ad. That's not really too much of a problem. And if you hire the person with the right attitude, they're going to be able to learn that skill even easier because they have the right attitude. The problem in their case would be, I don't know how to run ads at the level in which I need to. And so again, if they have the right attitude, they're going to go, I'm going to do anything and everything that I can to learn Facebook ads. Perfect example, that account manager I was just referring to, that's one of our top account managers now that didn't interview well. He'd never ran a Facebook ad before. We run Facebook ads for our clients. He was a copywriter by trade prior, and that's where all of his experience was copywriting. He'd never ran a Facebook ad before. When he first came on, we had to show him how to create an ad, like what button was what, etc. Now he's, again, one of our top account managers. And it's because he had the right attitude. He was the right person for the role. Not necessarily had the right experience, but he was the right person. And we just taught him the other skills. So this starts to interview for those things, right? Now, the framework in terms of how to do this is as follows. It's actually quite simple. You want to go ask these questions. Tell me about a specific time when, and then you want to imply difficult situation relating to an outcome of your scorecard, okay? Then you want to follow up with, what actions did you take? And then what were the end results? So a few keys to making these questions effective. You only ever want to add in one obstacle per question. Don't add in a bunch, just add in one obstacle per question when you imply it here. Also, make sure you have an open outcome. Don't ask for a successful or failed outcome, just leave it open. Never assume that the candidate took action or achieved a good outcome, right? So in other words, don't say, what actions did you take to meet the deadline? Because meeting the deadline is a good outcome. So you're implying that they met the deadline. Instead, you just want to leave it broad, or say achieve the goal. Again, you're implying that they had a successful outcome of achieving the goal, or satisfy the customer, etc. Don't assume, just leave it broad. And then also ask for the specific details. Again, this is what I was referring to before. This is the interview's power word, which is specific. So the only person who can talk about their specific problem-solving efforts and provide all the underlying detail about the actions that they took is somebody who actually did the work. That's why you always want to go specific, because you can't give specific details about something that you didn't do. You just can't. But if you did it, you can go super specific. You can talk about how you felt while you were doing, etc. So you always want to get those specific details to see if they actually did this thing or if they're just kind of telling you what you want to hear. So how do we write these questions? Because I understand this is super broad. How do you actually write these questions? Well, the first step is to understand what skills you require for the particular role that you're hiring for. This is where you just want to look at your scorecard, because most of the time they're in there. But an example, right? So you can think about skills required for an account manager. Now, just on the topic of skills real quick, when thinking of the skills required, think in terms of technical skills. So this would be things like media buying or development or closing, sales, right? They're the technical skills. Typically things which are black and white, or some people call them hard skills. It's like, can you media buy or not, right? It's can you sell or not? Now, obviously that's not black and white, because it's then a question of how good can you sell, etc. But that's technical or hard skills. That's how you want to think about. This is the thought process in which you want to use to figure out what skills are required, because there's different types of skills. But technical is one set. Then you've also got soft. So these are things, these are more so, people call these emotional intelligence skills. So things like people, like how, do you handle people well? How is your communication with people? Can you pick up on cues from other people? That's a skill, right? And then you've also got core competencies as well. So this, you want to refer to your scorecard, because obviously you should have wrote out all the core competencies. They should be things like high standards, initiative, etc. Honesty, integrity, showing up on time, attention to detail. These are all core competencies. So these are also skills that are required for the role, okay? So again, whatever role you're hiring for, list all of the skills required. So an account manager might be things like client management, project management, communication skills, media buying, copywriting, tech knowledge, general business acumen, right? Around your industry specifically, etc. These are all the skills required. And then based on these skills, you can then write your locus of control questions. So example questions in this example might be, tell me a specific time when you had to deal with an unhappy internal or external customer. So what is this referring to? Well, number one, it's referring to kind of like client management, communication skills, etc., client experience, whatever. And then also, if you look at this, you can see in terms of these keys to making these questions effective, you can see there's one obstacle, which is an unhappy client, basically, in other words. You've also got an open outcome. So I didn't say how did you successfully make a client happy again who wasn't happy previously or whatever, right? It's broad. Like, tell me about a time when you had to deal. So I'm not saying when you had because that kind of implies that they didn't do anything. I'm saying when you had to deal, you had to handle a situation with an unhappy customer. And then also, obviously, I'm not necessarily saying specific, but well, I am actually. Tell me about a specific time. So you're kind of asking about a certain instance. You know what I mean? It's not just like how would you handle a happy customer. It's like no. Tell me an instance when you handled an unhappy customer, right? Or another example here could be, tell me about a specific time when you rolled out new ad angles you were sure were going to perform but didn't. So this is speaking to the media buying, copywriting, if you want to call it that, technical, in other words, aspect of the skills required for the role of an account manager specifically, as an example. And again, not implying an outcome. I'm saying you launched them, you thought they were going to work, but they didn't. What happened? What did you do? Did you change them? Did you do this? Did you do that? Whatever. And then also another example could be, tell me about a specific time when you brought on a new account, which you had to scale, but you lacked direction. So again, one obstacle, but you lacked direction. There was no direction. You knew you had to scale it. So you knew what the ultimate outcome was, but you didn't have the step by step by step. What is this skill? Well, this skill is really a core competency of initiative. Did you're interviewing for, did they take the initiative to just do what was required, do what they kind of knew needed to happen, but they didn't have the step by step? Or did they go to a manager and ask, did they do that? What did they do? How did they handle it, right? So these, again, are going to show you where do they put the control of their life, in other words. And that's more so what you're looking for. How they answer this is going to show you what type of person they are, right? Now, even if you disagree with what they did, that's not what you're interviewing for here. What you're looking for is where do they put the control. That's what you're looking for. Do they go, oh, what I did was I just figured it out. I just did this. I just did that. I just whatever. Again, even if you don't agree with the fact that they did this, then this, then this, that doesn't really matter. But why? Because that's a skill. But what's not a skill, I would really say, is the fact that they just said, I just did this, I did this, I did this. And ultimately, we ended up getting the result, which was really good. But to get there, I just figured it out on my own. I just whatever, right? That's what you're looking for. All right. Another example was, in a closer instance. So again, communication skills, persuasion skills, sales ability, having uncomfortable conversations, super important for a closer. If they're not comfortable being uncomfortable on sales calls, that's a red flag. Challenging people, another red flag if they can't do that. Aggression, initiative, etc. Right. So some example questions here. Tell me about a specific time when where you had a prospect who started the call off with "Tell me the price." Right. This is super common for closers. They get these types of prospects, and there's always two types of closers. Always. There's the closer who would go, "Oh, I just move on to the next one." Right? Or there's a closer who, handles that client, right? Or handles that prospect. The one who says, I just moved on to the next one, never hire that closer, ever. Why? Because what those closers are relying on is the most perfect calls in order to get closes. That's what those guys rely on. Whereas the other closer is the type who just handles that situation, challenges them, has uncomfortable conversations, and ultimately brings them back on track for the sales call and actually goes through their structure, right? But again, you can see how asking that question is going to tell you what type of closer you're speaking with. Are they the type who are, kind of have been spoiled in past positions to where, some positions, they just get amazing qualified calls, and that's cool. But a closer who can close those guys shouldn't really call themselves a closer, because what they can close or what they can do is take orders. They can't make sales. And that's what you, again, are trying to interview for, right? So that's an example. Also, tell me about a specific time where you were not on pace to hit your projections for the month, right? So for a closer, typically they have monthly quotas, quarterly quotas, whatever it might be. We have monthly projections, and you want to know what happened when you was on. You could even be more specific here by saying, tell me about a specific time you were 3 weeks into a 4-week month and you were not on pace to hit your monthly projection. It's not what did you do to hit the projection, again implying the outcome. It's just tell me about the time, what happened, right? Tell me about a specific time where you had an angry prospect on the phone. Again, this is kind of ties in with this one. Do they just end the call and move on to the next one? Do they just quote, what they'll always put it under the guise of is, I'm not going to waste my time. That's what everyone does. Every bad closer will say, oh, I just moved on to the next one. I'm not going to waste my time with a prospect like that. It's like, no, you've got to figure out how to handle those situations, right? That's how they're going to make the most money, perform the best, etc. Then, based on whatever they say here, because here you're just asking for a specific time, right? You're not necessarily asking for specifics on what they did or whatever. So then, based on when they tell you that time, you then want to follow up with what actions did you take and what were the end results. Again, you're not implying that the end result was good or bad or whatever, but you're seeing just what happened, what was the outcome, right? And obviously, sometimes you ask these questions, I've found in the past, and some people just go, here's what I did. So they already answer the actions question, and then they also say, and here's what happened. Obviously, in that instance, you don't need to follow up, but if they just tell you a time, then you need to follow up with these as well. Probe, dig deeper, get specific, etc. All right, so what are you looking for here? I've kind of talked to this a little bit, but you're specifically wanting to look for where candidates place the control/responsibility of their problems. It may not be their fault, but it is their problem. That goes back to the age-old saying of, it's not your responsibility, but it is your problem, right? And so you want to see, again, where do they place the control? Right? And if they continuously blame others and require others to do X, Y, Z so that they can get the job done, that is a huge red flag. If they just you keep getting this feeling, and that's why you want to ask multiple, because you'll see a theme. Do they keep going to other people, getting other people involved, blaming other people, or saying, oh yeah, no, that was just bad. In the sales example, you might oftentimes get, oh yeah, they just continuously gave me bad calls. What are they blaming there? They're blaming marketing. You don't want your closers to be blaming marketing. You want your closers just to be like in the mindset, maybe it is marketing, right? Maybe it is, but you don't want people, you always want to look, you and your team always need to look inwards before you look outwards. And so with closers, they just default a lot of times to marketing. That is not good. You don't want that, because then guess what? As soon as they're not closing, who are they going to blame? They're not going to blame themselves because they're the best closer in the world, right? No, they're going to blame marketing, which is not good, because then they're not going to perform, basically. Because anytime they're, if they don't look inwards and go, what can I do to better fix this? What can I do? What could have I done? That prospect asked me about the price up front, didn't want to do any discovery. How could have I got them back on track and get them to answer the questions that I needed them to answer and follow my playbook? How could I make that transition? What could have I done? They're never going to ask those questions if it's always marketing, right? Or if it's always somebody else because they're perfect, right? So that's more so what you're looking for here, not necessarily the thing that they actually did. Now, in some instances, if you do want to hire someone who's got experience, who knows what they're doing, etc., then you do also want to look at what did they actually do, and do I agree with that? Did that actually help, work, whatever? But in most of the instances, that's not what's important. What's important is where do they put the control and responsibility.
You also want to see candidates' attitude towards life in general and the obstacles that they face. Obstacles only determine outcomes when we fail to try, fail to find solutions, or we quit too soon, right? All of which are controlled by our attitude. This is also ultimately why you want to be interviewing for attitude more so than the skills. Because if they have the right attitude, they're never going to fail because they just keep going. They're never going to quit. So they just keep going and figure it out, right? That's the type of team member you want. Now, a person's attitude is woven into every aspect of their life. It doesn't get left at home when they go to work. There is a direct relationship between a person's attitude toward overcoming obstacles and the level of effort that they will put forth. This is what you're identifying in this section of the interview. Like I said before, even if you ask a question about like their own personal stuff, like whatever it might be, their attitude towards that is also going to be their attitude towards work, because one person's attitude is their attitude, period. If they go super hard at the gym, they're also probably going to work super hard if they enjoy it, which is the next section here, which is career fit, right? Because somebody who just trains extremely hard obviously loves training, and that's their attitude. They just go super hard on things that they love. So if they love their job, they're also going to go super hard. It's a direct correlation between every aspect of their life. A lot of people say how you do one thing is how you do everything. I don't necessarily agree with that, because there's some things that I just don't do. I just, like, for example, personal life stuff, I'm terrible with. I have an EA who handles all of that for me. Because I just hate doing that. So like bills and whatnot, I just won't pay them, and I'll get a thing through saying about you got a fee for not paying the bill. I always get that stuff, but I don't anymore because I've got the EA. But before I had that, I used to always get that, right? So I don't agree with it's how you do everything, but how you do one thing is how you do everything that is the same as that one thing. So again, if you enjoy it, if you're passionate about it, etc., then you're gonna, however you do that one thing is how you do everything else that you're passionate about as well. Does that make sense? That's how I think. That's my philosophy on it. And so again, that's how I interview, and that is what this section is looking for specifically. The skill specific and locus of control questions. That's what you're trying to look for. Okay, moving on into career fit questions. So the goal here is to find the type of work an individual enjoys doing and what work they don't enjoy without judgment. So if what you figure out here, again, you got to go back to the first thing that I said in the interview. You're not interviewing to try and change the role to fit the person that you're speaking with. Instead, you're trying to find the people who just don't fit. That's what you're trying to find. So if you're speaking with someone and the answers to these questions are great, and their work history and their experience is amazing, you want to make sure that you're not asking these questions that I'm about to show you in a way that just gets the candidate to tell you what you want to hear, because that can sometimes happen. I see that quite often. You get somebody really experienced, and then you need to ask the career fit questions, and so you ask them in a way that I keep saying prospect, the candidate is going to say what you want to hear to them. Instead, you want to really, without judgment, without subjective implications, you want to really figure out what do they love, what do they not love. And the people who, what they like doesn't align with your role at all, you need to just exclude those guys and move on to the next person. This also ties into the idea of why it's so important to have ideally 20 plus interviews, right? Because if you're hell-bent on one person, then you're going to have, a lot of people call it like happy ears, or there's another word for it as well. It's just basically where you have selective deafness and you hear only the things you want to hear, and everything that you're like, doesn't really align with what you want to hear, you just kind of don't listen to it, right? You become deaf to that thing and you only hear the good things, and you're like, yep, they're amazing. Don't worry about everything else. They're amazing, right? Don't be that person. Now, once you know these things about a candidate, you want to then compare those likes and dislikes with the scorecard for the position and see if they align, obviously. Now, finding alignment is exactly what career fit is all about. If you enjoy your work, you'll work harder and quite possibly stay in the job longer. Super basic, but it's also very true, all right? So, likes and dislikes. 2 questions to ask here. Out of all the jobs you've held, which was your favorite? And then follow up with why. Out of all the jobs you've held, which was your least favorite? Follow up with why. And then based on obviously their answers, you're trying to find alignment with what they like, what they didn't like, along with the reality of the position in which you're hiring for. You've not expressed the reality of your position yet, so you can't. Well, you would have mentioned it in the the hiring VSL and whatnot, but the specifics, the deep specifics of it, you wouldn't have really shown them just yet. So you want to be, again, objectively listening to their answers and comparing that to the reality of your role. and see if there's alignment, basically. Now, another variation of the above questions, if you just want to have a different variation of this, is you could say, if you could change one thing about your last job, what would it be? What's the one thing you wouldn't change about your last job? Both of these are going to give you good insight into their likes and dislikes. Then we move into strengths and weaknesses. So on your last performance evaluation, these are the two questions you want to ask here. On your last performance evaluation, in which 3 areas were you rated the strongest? On your last performance evaluation, tell me the 2 areas that you could improve on. Okay. Then based on those 2, you want to immediately follow up with, or sorry, not based on those 2, just based on this last one, you want to then immediately follow up with, what, if anything, have you done to improve your weaknesses? Now, make sure, just quick side note, you always ask this one first. Why? Because if you lead with what were your, based on your last performance evaluation, what were the 2 areas you could have improved on, what the candidate is most likely going to say is, oh, we didn't do evaluations, or like, oh, I can't really remember my last performance evaluation, right? Because they don't want to speak to their weaknesses. But if you ask the strongest first, right, on your last performance evaluation, in which areas were you rated the strongest, they're always going to be like, oh, they said this, they said this, they said this. Then you want to follow up with immediately, what were you weakest? Because then they can't say, oh, I don't remember, because they just, flexed, if you want to call it that, all their strengths, right? Bit of a key there. Now, from this question, you'll either get, right, from this second question, I should say, you'll either get I can't answers along with justifications as to why, or you'll get let me tell you what I've done, or here's what I've done answers, followed by specific details. This also obviously shows locus of control. Do they think that they can improve, and do they take on feedback? Are they coachable? That kind of interviews for that idea. Are they coachable? Do they look inward before they look outward, etc.? Now, if you need to use follow-up questions, if you need to use follow-up questions to get deeper into their specific solutions, if based on this they say, oh yeah, whatever, they could say 101 things. They just give you something that's kind of broad. Follow up with specific questions, because specific questions lead to specific answers. Now, when you ask about weaknesses, make sure you downplay it. Make it seem like you don't really care about the information, that you already like the candidate, but you just have to ask the question as a formality. This is how you're going to get the truest answer from the candidate. Now, the reason we ask about their last performance evaluation is because it's less subjective. We can easily reference check their last boss and confirm these answers. You won't want to say, what do you feel as though you're strongest in? What do you feel as though you're weak in, right? Why? Because not only is that subjective, but also on their weaknesses, they're never going to give you weaknesses. They're going to give you strengths that are masked as weaknesses. So what do I mean by that? If you've ever interviewed before, you most likely would have heard of, if you ask, what are your weaknesses? The person will most likely say, oh, I work too much, right? Or I care for my work too much, or whatever. It's like, no, that's not a weakness. That's a strength, right? And they know that. They're trying to act like they don't have any weaknesses. Whereas on their performance report, no boss would ever say, this person works too much. No one would ever say that, so it's less subjective, right? Okay, now if they haven't done a performance review, because this might actually be the case, like sometimes they just genuinely don't do a performance review, and you'll be able to truly see that by first asking what is your strengths based on your performance review, because most people want to flex, so they want to tell you, and so if they say, actually, I don't have it, then you know it's true, because maybe they've been their own boss in the past, or maybe, some employers are really bad, they don't actually do performance reviews, believe it or not, right? They don't check in on their team's performance, they don't, some people are really bad at leading, so if that is their case, then you want to change the question to basically be, if we were to give your supervisor a call at your last job, what would they say your 3 strongest areas are? Then on the flip side, if your supervisor, if your supervisor were to do an evaluation today, what would they say your 2 weakest areas are? I actually don't like the framing of this question. Let me change that. Yeah, this is what I ask. I just asked the same thing, but on the weaknesses. So if we were to give your supervisor a call, what would they say your 2 weakest areas are? Simple as that, right? And everyone's going to give you answers to these because everyone's had a supervisor in the past. All right, then we move into goals. So again, this is all about career fit. Does the role that you're hiring for fit with this with this candidate and the things that they like, that they don't like, with their strengths, with their weaknesses, and with their goals, right? Do you feel as though this role that you're hiring for could be, based on their goals, the thing that's going to actually help them achieve their goals? Why? Because if the role that anyone on your team is in with you, if that role is the thing that's going to help them achieve their goals, that's, they're achieving their personal goals by virtue of working with you, that's somebody that's going to stay on your team forever until they don't feel as though, you're providing them with their goals anymore. So you want to know what those goals are. So super simple. Tell me about your career goals for the next 2 to 5 years. And then you immediately want to follow up with what actions, if any, have you taken toward reaching them? Okay. Now, what their answer is to this second question is arguably more important than the first, right? Meaning what their answer is to what actions have you taken toward achieving them is arguably more important than this one. However, you do want to make sure based on this question here that their goals aligns with the role that you're hiring for itself, right? If you're hiring for an account manager and they say, I want to make $1 million a year, well, obviously it's not going to align, right? So you want to make sure that, again, there's a fit there. Now, some candidates will explain what's preventing them from making progress. Referring to this question here, they might explain what's preventing them from making progress towards their goal and say something like, well, I have so much going on right now with everyone leaning on me to handle all of these responsibilities or this or that. It's impossible to work on my goals right now. That's not a good sign. Other candidates will say something like, although I haven't made much progress, I have put together a plan that outlines exactly what steps I need to take. And one of the things, actually, I see this role as being one of those things that I can use to get to my goal or whatever it might be, right? You can see they're just being more proactive, okay? So that is career fit. Pretty self-explanatory there. I don't think I need to expand on that too much more. Finally, you want to finish off the initial interview with just a candidate Q&A. Okay, so open up the floor for the candidate to ask any questions that they have about the role, the company, etc. Whatever it is, Q&A there. And then finally finish off the interview with assigning them the task which you have created, which is the next section, which is the role-specific task. This is only if you feel as though this person is a pretty good fit for the role. Now, here's what to look for from the interview overall. I know in each section I was going through, like what to look for from this section, whatever. But from the interview overall, here is what you want to be looking for. Again, alignment with your scorecard, specifically the mission, the outcome, and the competencies. And also I would even say the compensation. Because again, like I said before, if they really next year want to make $1 million a year and you're hiring for a position that's $5K a month, there's not going to be a fit there, right? So you want to make sure that there's alignment between all of those 4 things. Again, this is why it's critical that you create that scorecard first, right? Also, you want to look for candidates who primarily talk in terms of results, not untrackable, insignificant outcomes. So for example, during that role, were there any significant accomplishments, right? Maybe you ask that question, right, in their work history and education section. And if they answer, one of the biggest accomplishments was being the top setter of X company over my tenure. I was able to month on month set 15 to 20 more calls than the next best guy. The next best guy was still booking 55 to 60 calls per month, but I was able to outpace him routinely because of X, whatever it might be. See how not only specific that is, but also result focused this is, right? Instead, you do not want someone to say, one of my biggest accomplishments was that I was awarded X award at my last company because I had been the longest and most consistent member on the team. It's like, what does that mean? No one cares about that. You want result focused people on your team, right? Because then when you bring them on board and you manage them against a set of results, if they're just so used to not having direct trackable metrics, right, associated to their performance, rather they're just used to, being called the best because they work the hardest. It's like, what does that mean? It's most likely not going to work out. Also, just basic stuff, highly engaged, right? Are they like, yep, 100% no, I love that, whatever? Or are they just kind of a little bit more sat back? Very in-depth answers, also good. Again, these are good things to see. It's not like if they don't have highly in-depth answers, that's an absolute no-go. Because like one of our highest performing account managers, like I said, he was quite just, straight to the point. I could see he's quite nervous, etc. But he's turned out to be great. So these are just things to look for. Also, quick on their feet, but take time to think through a question if needed and not just talking to talk. I prefer quick answers on things that they've done and on questions about their sales philosophy or typical sales process, etc. if it's obviously a sales rep. And I like longer, more thought out responses to questions that aren't as black and white. For example, what are your weaknesses? Or what's your 5-year goal, right? That's kind of my preference, I would say here. Also, clear explanations of why of why previous jobs ended and why they started the next role, right? Clear explanations on what they specifically wanted. If they don't know exactly what they want, how are you as a leader meant to give them what they want, right? Also, you want clear explanations as to why they've left previous job roles. If they can't explain this, that's a bad sign. Okay, and then also just red flags in general, and more specifically, signs of B or C players. So the candidate doesn't mention past failures. That means they're just not transparent, right? If they're so like no one's perfect. So if you're speaking with someone, they just have nothing's ever gone bad in their life. It's just like that's a red flag. Speaks poorly of past bosses or the team, past team members or colleagues. That's a huge red flag. You do not want to hire anyone that is that speaks badly of past bosses. Also, this kind of speaks to the idea of looking internal versus looking external, right? If they're constantly blaming bosses, blaming team, they're just putting their locus of control externally on things other than themselves. Not a good sign. Also, cannot explain job moves, right? Only cares about the compensation of the role. Super big red flag. Only asking about time off and vacation time and overall role benefits, right? As opposed to like, how can I win in this role? They're asking how many weeks per year do I have off, right? Also wants to travel. Yeah, I'm not a fan of people on my team personally, but again, I would argue that's more of a personal preference than it is like an absolute no-go. Whereas like something like this is a no-go. This is more of a personal preference, but just so you know, I don't like my team traveling every other week, right? Because it's just not good. So they're the things that you're looking for on the interview. And again, big picture here, what you're looking for on the interview is people who are clearly not A players. That's more so what you're looking for, as opposed to, oh my God, this person's absolutely perfect. You will get a better feel for that based on obviously having a 45-minute conversation with them. But even based on this initial interview, you're probably still not going to feel 100% certain, oh my God, this is the person. Like I've said multiple times, our top account manager, I had this initial interview with him. I didn't feel, I was like, And I actually spoke to one of our managers and I said to him, yeah, he's okay about this new hire, a while back. I was like, yeah, he's okay, but I'm probably just going to put him on the bench. I don't feel 100% on him. Right. And I, like I said before, I put him on our bench, and then 2 months later or whatever it was, I reached back out to him because we needed someone, went to our bench, like I told you about in the application training, I think it was. We went to our bench and we hired from that. He was one of them, turned out to be amazing, but he didn't interview amazingly well in this initial interview. So point being is that just look for the guys who are just clearly not good fit. Everyone else, you want to then assign them the role specific task, which is going to be the next training here. So any questions on this stuff, let me know. And with that being said, I will see you in the next training.
So far, we've gone through how to generate applications, how to obviously get those zapped into this hiring pipeline for the particular role that you're hiring for, and then what we need to look for in those applications. Then we've also just gone through, obviously, the MBI interview. Now we want to go through the role specific task, how to create that task, and essentially why we use it. So first things first, it's not mandatory that you do one of these tasks. I tend to go always above and beyond. So I do it for every single role that I hire for. I always get them to complete a task. But more specifically, I do it because of a few things. So number one, it gives the, prospect, it gives the candidate a taste of the reality of the role, no matter what it is, whether it's closing, whether it's, account manager, whatever it is, gives them a taste of the reality of the role. And you'll know by now, like that's one of my big things. And I think that's also why we have such a high or such a low attrition rate amongst our team. And our team really likes working at scale clients. I think it's because on the front end, I really do disqualify people very, very hard based on the reality of the role. Like I show them everything. I hide nothing. And then obviously all that's left after people who, are still bought in after I've shown them everything about the role is the people who are naturally going to succeed in the role. So I think that's really important, and not a lot of companies do that in my opinion. So this is one of those times where you can give them a reality of the role. It also gives you a deeper insight into their skills, right? Because you're getting them to do a task related to the role. So you can see, how they operate, their skills, are they actually good at what they do or what and whatnot. It also shows you their initiative and work ethic. Because you can see, how long does it take them to get the task back to you? How deep do they go? Do they take the task seriously? Do they, what's their attention to detail like? You can see all of these things that, in my opinion, it's very difficult to see otherwise if you don't do a task. And then obviously it eliminates tire kickers, because the people who are just, not that serious or not that bought in or interested or don't have that much intent to actually want to work with you, they just won't do it because it does require some work and they just won't do it. Okay, great. Now you've eliminated those. So you only want to give this task to people you feel have great potential based on the MBI interview. Now you'll have the MBI interview with a handful of people who you never take further down the hiring line, and that's totally fine. And that's, again, the point of why we're doing what we're doing. So this this is only for the people who you're like, this person looks good, I feel good about them, they, you know, are showing positive signs, etc., based on that initial MBI interview that we just went through in the previous training. So those people you want to give this role specific task to. Now, here's an example of a task that we get all new potential account managers to complete. Now, we don't actually get them to do this specific one anymore. I've been testing the task out a lot in terms of what type of task we do, etc. I'll show you kind of where we're currently at, but this is one example. So literally, I just send them this doc. And again, the same ideas apply as the task in the application, to where you don't want to give them like every individual specific thing, because it's not that hard to follow step by step by step by step instructions. Kind of anyone can do that. And so then if you give somebody step by step instructions, you don't really get a true insight into their skills or their initiative or their work ethic, etc. And you also don't give them really a reality of the role, because in the reality of any role, you're not going to be there every single day telling them step by step by step exactly what to do. So that's why you don't want to do it in the task, right? You want to try and mirror as closely as possible the reality of the position. So this is the task I gave account managers a while back. Step 1, using your experience and or knowledge of media buying, you are tasked with creating an ad strategy for this company. And I just linked a completely random company. I didn't know who they were. They had no affiliation with us. It was just a random, I literally just searched service-based businesses or something, and just click the first one and just put in the link, right? Aside from physically publishing the ads, leave everything in draft. Treat this as a brand new client that we've just signed on board. Everything from ad copy and headlines to audiences and campaign structure must be clearly outlined and detailed. Create 3 ad variations for top of funnel and 3 ad variations for bottom of funnel. Craft the ad copy yourself from conducting research into the brand, and pull creatives from the brand's Instagram, Facebook, website, etc. That's step 1. Step 2, once you finish your strategy and the 6 ad variations, create a loom detailing the strategy itself and your thought process behind why you've done what you've done. Also, provide 2 to 4 things that you would tell, that's the brand. Anyway, that you would tell X to do on their end in order to improve the results. This could be things they could improve within their sales process, or creative ideas that you feel could perform tremendously well, etc. That's it. Gave a little bit of insight. Obviously, there's a bit of instruction there, but nothing more or nothing really less than the account manager would have when, if they was to actually come on board, they would get a very similar kind of job description, if you want to call it that, if they were actually on board. So you want to try again, mirror that in the task you give them. What we then switch to after that is I went kind of even further, and now we're kind of reining it back a little bit, but I went even further, even more aggressive than this account manager task. I recently, for our new account managers, I got them to go through our entire account manager university, which again, you can see, I'll be breaking all of this down in the onboarding and ramping of new account managers, but you can see our account manager university is really in depth. I mean, like there's a lot here. And partly because, there's a whole lot. And so what I actually started to do was get new account managers who performed really well in that MBI. Their role-specific task was to go through our entire account manager university, which is just basically an end-to-end on everything that an account manager needs to do. And obviously this gave them the most reality into the position, because this is the position. This is exactly how we ramp up new account managers. Now, I don't really recommend that. It was just because I wanted to give them the most reality possible. But again, I don't really recommend this, because then you're giving away your entire company basically. And that's what I found I was doing, was giving all these people literally our entire backend, like everything. So I don't necessarily recommend that. That said, what I'll do is the new task that we're going to be, because I'm currently working on building out the new account manager task, I'll link that in here so you've got it for reference. And then you can kind of mirror that. But again, that's only for account managers anyway. This style though is what you want to do ideally for every single role that you hire for. Get them to do some kind of role related task. That's really all it is. Now, once they send in the task, what you want to look for is how many questions did they ask, / how much help did they need? Were they, self-sufficient? Did they kind of just do it on their own? Or were they constantly messaging you, asking questions? That's not a good sign if they are constantly messaging, asking questions. How long was the turnaround time? How long did it take them to do it? Because you see on here, there's no timeline. Whenever I gave account managers access to this, I just said, go through it, let me know your thoughts once you've gone through it. That's all I told them. There was no specific, get this back to me in 2 days or 5 days or a week, whatever it is. There was none of that. And you actively don't want to give them that, because you want to see in their mind, what's an acceptable turnaround time? Is that 4 weeks or is that 4 days? What's acceptable to them, right? How much effort did they put in? Ultimately, how good was the task itself? Like, Did they actually launch good ads? Did they write good ads, right, in this instance? And obviously everything I'm saying here for the account manager specific role or task is related to ads, because that's obviously what we do for clients. If you do CRO for your clients, it will be related to CRO. If you do website development, it'll be related to website development. If you do, if you coach people on how to start a dropshipping store, it'll be on dropshipping and building a store, right? It's just whatever's role specific. And again, if you felt the candidate did well, then you would move them into the next stage of the hiring process and conduct the next interview. So pulling up our pipeline here, you would obviously move them into the MBI interview. You would have that. If they look good, you would then send them this role-specific task that we're creating. Then once they send that back to you, you would then move them into role-specific task received, and then you will know that you need to review all the people who are in this section for their task. You need to review the task. Great. If the task looks good, they got it back to you in a timely manner, etc. Then you would want to move them into the scorecard interview, which will be the next training, and it's the second and last interview that we have in our hiring process. So hopefully this makes sense. Questions? Let me know.
All right. So the next interview in the process is going to be the scorecard interview. So by this point, you've had the MBI interview, obviously with the prospect, with the candidate. Then you've filtered out the guys who obviously just, again, clearly aren't A players, right? That's really what throughout this entire process, the application, the first interview, the role specific task, the scorecard interview, you're always looking for the people who are just clearly not good fits, because then that's naturally going to open up the only people that are going to be left are the ones who are a good fit, basically, right? That's my philosophy, at least. And so by this point, you should be left with everyone who is seemingly a good fit. And obviously, you also, most of the time, are going to also disqualify people based on the role-specific task. You're going to disqualify them based on how long it takes them to get it back. And then also just like, what do they actually give you, right? Because sometimes, people just, what they think is acceptable is like a 2-minute little video or whatever it might be, or a 2-sentence thing based on the task or whatever it might be. It's just like, that's just not good enough, So those are the people you want to exclude. Now you're left with everyone else. So the scorecard interview really is just now about, obviously, I'm sure you could guess, but really getting clear with alignment associated to the role itself. That's really all the scorecard interview is for. Get clear alignment between the role and the candidate. So this interview is where you share the screen and walk the candidate through the scorecard itself. This interview essentially allows you to find deeper alignments between the candidate and the specific outcomes of the role and your culture. Super important stuff. So the interview of the scorecard is literally you just share your screen and walk through the scorecard. That's literally the interview of this, the structure of this interview, I should say. So for example, if we was doing an account manager, I would, as I am doing right now, share my screen and walk them through. I'll be like, so this is the role. The mission for the account manager role is X. The outcomes are XYZ. Go through all the outcomes. Here are the competencies, and then the performance-based compensation is at the end. That's literally the structure. Now, what you want to do that's additional to this scorecard itself, to what's written on here, is for the outcomes, you want to list the outcome and follow up with one of the below questions. So you don't want to just say, here it is, and just word vomit onto them. What you want to do is you want to go list the outcome, and even for the mission as well. I don't know why I've not wrote that for the mission, but you want to be following up with questions asking what similar accomplishments have you had which are in alignment with this specific outcome, referring to obviously these outcomes here, right? What challenges have you encountered with a similar outcome? What are your insights here? You want to be engaging the candidate. You want to be getting feedback, and this should be more of a dialogue than it is, you just talking. It should be back and forth dialogue. You should be having, getting insights. One of the things, the Hormozis, I think it was Layla Hormozi who first said it. She said, the people that you bring on board should educate you in the interview process. And so in the first MBI interview, you don't get a lot of that from the prospect, from the candidate. I apologize. I keep saying prospect. From the candidate, you don't get a lot of, really deep insights based on their experience and their thoughts and whatever else, because you're asking them specific questions about obviously work history, whatever else. In the scorecard interview, this is where you want to start to feel out how deep is their knowledge? What do they think? How are they thinking, etc. And this is also where you can start to see if are you generating insights from this hire, right? So if I talk about, for example, this, are they giving me insights or feedback on potentially, well, how do you guys do this? Do you guys do it in this way or that way? No, we do it in that way. Okay, gotcha. Have you ever thought about doing this? The only reason why I ask is because at one of my last jobs, one of the things we always found was this happened, and then what happened as a consequence was this. So what we changed was this, and then this ended up being the result. Just a thought. That's the type of insight and feedback and dialogue again that you want to be having with the candidates. You want to be kind of, especially if it's like an account manager role, closer role, same thing. You kind of want to be geeking out on whatever the role is. So like with some of our best account managers, they give me feedback. They're like, why do you do that? Have you ever thought about doing this or doing that? Or, for example, one of the things we only do for clients, at least as of right now, is Facebook ads. One of the things that one of our most recent hires, he was saying to me about in the interview process was, which I kind of know about it, but it was just good to hear him speak about it. He was talking about the idea of, obviously people see Facebook ads and they search on Google. Well, what we could potentially do is, and also that type of language, what we could potentially do is we could potentially look at this and do Google ads for the client. So then that way, only low budget stuff, but then that way when they see the Facebook ad, they search, then we can kind of capture that prospect with the Google ad itself and kind of get the conversion, capture the conversion that way. Also, it's just going to increase client results overall because now they're actually ranking at the top of Google. They're doing this, they're doing that, right? That's how you want the interview to be structured. And that's when you've got a real A player, when they're thinking about ways to improve, when they're thinking about what you're talking about. The worst thing you can have, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, but what I'm saying here is applying to all of this, the entire interview. The worst thing to have is someone where you go through the outcome, for example, and you go, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. Okay, great. And then you go, what are your thoughts on that? Any questions? You could again use these follow-up questions. Any questions? Have you encountered this in the past? Like, how have you handled this situation? And they go, no questions. No, I've never encountered this. Or yeah, I've encountered that. It was we was basically getting the same results, and that's it. It's just like, nope, whatever, nope, and that's it. There's nothing to them. There's no ideas put forth. There's no back and forth. They're not engaged. Maybe they are engaged, but they're not giving you new ideas. They're not thinking of new ways, and they're not showing initiative, right? That's really what you're looking for in this scorecard interview, because that also speaks to the alignment. If they get excited about this stuff, that's how you know you got someone good, right? If they get excited and are giving you insights, giving you feedback, giving you coaching, maybe not coaching, it's probably not the best way to put it because not a lot of people are going to try and coach the interviewer, right? But just giving you feedback or just giving you their thoughts in general, or giving you stuff that has worked at past positions. Oh yeah, well, when we was at this other position, what we was actually doing was this, or maybe you could think about that or whatever. They're the good guys, right? So yeah, repeat these probing questions for each outcome that you list, right? So you list this outcome, you ask what insights. Okay, gotcha. Well, the next thing is this, what insights, right? Or what are your thoughts here? Any feedback? Have you experienced this in the past? What did you do last time that you were, running ads, or, whatever it might be, right? What we're looking for here is experience achieving your listed outcomes and breadth of knowledge surrounding them. You are also wanting to see if the candidate is engaged, showing signs of being coachable, asking for feedback, really thinking through their answers. That's another thing. If you speak about something like, for example, the outcomes, typically they're not really going to think through a lot, because these are going to be stuff, typically the outcomes should be in alignment with what they've done in the past. It's not necessarily something brand new to them. Whereas the mission, when you explain the mission and you go, any insights here, any thoughts, any feedback, anything you're thinking in general, you want to see them actually really thinking through it. Like, yeah, this is really interesting. Yeah, well, like kind of thinking through their answer. One of the best people that does this is Elon Musk. Love him, hate him, whatever. He's done some crazy stuff, and in a lot of his interviews, when he gets asked a question that he's maybe not thought about before, or is not commonly asked in general, he'll always take a minute to just think. And I love people that do that, because it shows you that they're not just talking to talk. They're really trying to give you an answer that they really believe. And it also, in a weird way, shows you that they really care. People that just talk, no one ever knows the answer to every single question that they get asked straight off the bat. Whereas if they sit back and really think about it, it shows you that they care, because they want to give you the best answer possible. Or they're really trying to think through the problem or whatever it is. It shows you that they care, that they're bought in, that they have initiative, right? So that's what we're looking for there. Same thing with competencies, honestly. Here we're looking for agreement, okay? Examples from when they had to demonstrate similar competencies in the past. You can actually ask them, can you explain a time that when you showed a high level of initiative or whatever it might be? Kind of same as agreement. You want to look for buy-in. Like, do they actually agree and buy into the idea that, yes, initiative is super important, or yes, that, as we say here, high standards, super important, or communication, super important, whatever it might be. Do they agree? And then also, again, back and forth conversation, not one-sided. You must also probe. If you do all the talking, then by default, it will be one-sided. So you want to make sure that you're giving the candidate the opportunity to give you feedback, because if you don't give them that opportunity and then they don't give you feedback or insights or whatever, then yeah, that's on you, right? But if you keep asking them, what are your thoughts, questions, how you feeling on that, whatever, and they're just like, yep, good, no questions, yep, no, that's not good. So some questions you can you can do here is, what are your questions on that specifically? What are your insights here? How do you feel about that specifically, etc. And then finally, you want to finish off with performance compensation. So go through the compensation for the role and how it ties into performance. I always map the specifics on exactly what the OTEs are if they hit projections and perform at a similar level to the current team. OTEs obviously being on target earnings or on track earnings. And again, you want to get buy-in from the candidate and see if this aligns with what they are ultimately wanting to earn. One of our sales coaches, when I first explained the OTE for him, he really didn't like it, and he showed it. He said to me, he's like, nah, I'm not really. And then we had a bit of back and forth. Again, I call it productive conflict. I think that's really, really important to have with your team and the team in general, to always be in productive conflict. Patrick Lencioni talks a lot about that, but he really pushed back on the compensation, and I explained it, and we was kind of going back and forth and whatever else. But like, you don't want people to, you don't want yes men, right? Just like, oh yeah, no problem or whatever. Because then also when he pushed back, again, I showed that he really cared about it, and that we then was able to put a plan in place for him to actually hit his goal. You know what I mean? And then again, like I said in the past, if your role is the vehicle that your hires or your team, more importantly, can use to achieve their own goals, they're going to stay with you for a lifetime. So anyway, that is literally the scorecard interview. Just go through the scorecard itself. Make sure you're following up with these questions here, getting buy-in, having that dialogue, dialogue, and having that back and forth. And again, more importantly, looking for the people who are giving you insights really on like the outcomes and their feedback and what their thoughts are and how can we make this better and whatever else. So that's really the second interview. Now we're going to go into making the hiring decision. And really what you're looking for in this interview, I should say, just to finish off here, is really just what I just said before, having that back and forth dialogue, etc. And the guys who, because obviously now you're exposing the performance-based compensation. So it's like, well, if I don't think this person's 100%, like how am I going to, to kind of take back the fact that I've explained the compensation and this is how much you're going to make, etc. if I don't want to bring them on board? Well, how you finish off this interview, I should have wrote this out, but how you finish or end this scorecard interview is essentially by showing go through this, show the performance-based compensation, get their buy-in. Do they feel as though this aligns with what they want, etc.? Yes, awesome, perfect. Any final questions, open up the floor for a general Q&A at the end. Any feedback for me, any final questions, whatever? No, great. Here's next steps. And then what I always do is I go, here's next steps. Over the next 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, however long, however many more interviews you've got, over the next 2 weeks, I've got another 16 interviews to have. However, with that being said, by X date, give them a date, don't ever just leave them kind of open, because if they're A players, they're going to have other opportunities. So you need to make sure that you're specifically giving them next steps, when they can expect an answer from you, etc. Because you don't want them going taking another job just because they thought, oh, I thought you were already hired because I've not heard anything from you. No, you want to make sure that you put a date on it by the, 20th of May, whatever. By the 20th of May, I'm going to by then have all of our interviews, and on the 20th I'm going to make a decision. So with that being said, please just keep an ear out or an eye out for an email. I'll send you over an email on the 20th, whether you got the job or not. I'll send you over an email, right? Then you end the call there, and then obviously now you've got time to kind of go through all your candidates and make your final decision, and then obviously reach out. And also, as I just said there, make sure you do reach out to the guys who got the job, obviously, and the guys who also didn't get the job, because that's also going to help you with the bench at a later date. If you just not disrespect, but just like never speak to a candidate again just because they didn't get the job, you never. I don't want to never say never, but it's going to be more difficult for you to reach back out to that person at a later date when you might actually want to go ahead and hire them. So with that being said, as I say, I'll see you in the next training where we're going to go through making the hiring decision. Okay, so in this one, we're going to go through making the final decision, making the hiring decision. Now, I will say by this point, most of the time, after taking a candidate through the above sequence of interviews, etc., application, getting them to do the task, getting them to go through the scorecard, etc., the person or people that you should be hiring will be extremely clear, right? And that's really, again, the whole point of all the previous steps is to remove all of the B and C players, remove everyone who's not an A player, remove everyone who doesn't align with your culture and values, etc. And by the end of it, you're pretty much left with, the only person that would be a good fit, or the only people that are a good fit based on, again, based on the outcomes required for the role, based on the competencies which tie into your culture, right? That, in other words, your competencies are your values, right? Maybe not exactly the same, but they should stem from your values, so they buy into the culture. You just genuinely like them, you get on with them, etc. They're the only people that are left. And so in an ideal world, you hire everyone that's left. However, if you want more of a mental model to follow on how to make the hiring decision, you want to follow the below. So this is called the alignment triad. And it essentially says what the candidate can do aligns with what they will do, which ultimately aligns with your scorecard. So let's break each one down. What the candidate can do. This refers to the candidate's ability to actually achieve the outcomes on your scorecard. Do they have this ability? If yes, then they are an A player, and ask this question for each and every outcome. So you want to pull up the scorecard. Let me pull one up here, for example. Okay, so you want to look at the outcomes and go, can this person do this? Can they do this? Can they do this? Are they the best person to do this, right? And then you want to do the same thing for the competencies as well, as I'll go through here in a minute. Now, it's important here to also factor in the candidate's coachability, because they may not, or some people may not, currently have 100% of the skills required, but may be extremely coachable, which will allow you to mold them into the person who has the skills required, right? Like I said before, one of our top account managers, he didn't know how to run ads. He had the copywriting skills, so we have a couple different skills required, etc. So he had some of them, but not all of them. But he also was a great fit based on all the other metrics as well. So I still brought him on board, and also I did it because he was coachable. So if you go through your outcomes and you go, can they achieve this? Can they do these specifics for this outcome? If the answer right now is no, that's not an immediate, non-fit, right? Somebody who you just disregard immediately. No, because the next question you want to ask is, okay, they can't do it right now, but do I think they're the type of person to be able to achieve that skill? If I teach them, if I pour into them, are they the type of person to be able to achieve that skill? If the answer is still no, or you're not 100% yes without a doubt, then yes, that's when you would want to then just remove them from the conversation. But if the answer is yes, and you're like, yeah, 100% they could definitely achieve that skill or learn this or do whatever, then, that's still a great fit, right? So that's the first thing, right? What the candidate can do. Do they have the ability to either do it right now, the outcomes right now, achieve the outcomes right now, or do they have the ability to learn to learn how to do the outcomes, which by extension then makes them a candidate that can do the outcomes, right? Then you want to align that with what they will do. Right? So will they actually do the thing? Because some people can do it, but they might not do it, right? So will the candidate do the job required if they have the skill? Simple as that, right? And now this refers to the competencies that they have and whether or not they align with the competencies that you've outlined in your scorecard. So again, you want to go through each competency listed on your scorecard and ask yourself, does X candidate have this competency? Do they show a high likelihood that they will achieve, that they will act in alignment with this, right? Again, if the answer is yes, then they are an A player. Now, this one is more strict in that they must have it right now, because you can't really teach efficiency or teach aggressiveness, for example, or teach analytical skills is a little different because that's more of a skill than a competency, but you get the point. Are they calm under pressure? You can't teach somebody to be calm under pressure, or at least it's very difficult to. So you want to go through each one, because again, the reason why we started with the scorecard is because this is exactly what you need. So unless you're using the scorecard as your point of truth or source of truth when it comes to making the hiring decision, there's no point doing this stuff. So you want to go through, again, each competency. If I was a candidate, right? Does Kai show high levels of efficiency? Is Kai aggressive? Does he have analytical skills? Is he calm under pressure? Does he have strategic thinking and visioning? Is he enthusiastic, right? Does he have a high level of work ethic, etc.? You want to go through and answer each one. And the person who matches the scorecard the most is the person that really you should be making, who should be coming on board. And naturally, going back to this here, if you look at the guys that you're currently weighing up or the girls that you're weighing up, without doing this here, without looking at the alignment triad, if there's anyone that you're like, yes, this person is 100% the one, then most of the time, if you then take them through this alignment triad just to double check your thinking, most of the time they should align with it. They're like, yeah, the reason why I think they're the best person is because they can do everything on the scorecard or show high levels of coachability, and they will do it because they align 100% with the competencies, right? So the candidates you extend an offer to is, again, someone who, number one, shows an ability to achieve the outcomes listed on your scorecard, and number two, shows a high level of alignment with the competencies that you've also listed on your scorecard. Now, if you have 2 to 3 candidates who you cannot decide on in terms of one person specifically, just extend an offer to them all, because some naturally won't accept. And if 2 or all of them accept, you want to put them up against each other in the first 2 to 4 weeks, and usually you will see one that soars. You want to then drop the others or keep them all if they perform, and just scale your volume. And I actually recommend this. Ideally, you always want to hire, where possible, 2 people at once, because not only there's a bunch of benefits that come with this. Number one, namely the fact that, as I said up here, they kind of compete together a little bit, so you're going to see increase in performance. But also number two, it takes once, you ramp people once. If you've got 2, 3, 4 people, you ramp them all once. Whereas if you was to break those guys up, you got to ramp everyone 4 times if you break them up into 4 different hiring instances, right? However, what's super important here is when you bring on 2 or more people, you got to make sure that you provide them with enough volume for them to succeed. So as I say here, you must ensure whoever you bring on, you are able to fully set them up for success. This means that if you bring someone on board and they don't work out, but you didn't give them proper training or enough volume, whether it's sales calls or clients, if it's an account manager, etc., or enough support, it's 100% on you as to why it did not work out, right? The reason why they did not work out is because of you, not the hire. And if you don't fix that, you'll continue making the same mistake over and over and over again, just every single time. Like if you bring on a closer, don't give them any calls, they're not going to close and you end up firing them. Then you bring on another closer and you don't fix the problem of the fact that you didn't give them enough call volume. The second close is not going to work out. If you do it again, the third is not going to work out, etc. Right? Now, also make sure that you always focus on setting up your people for success. Remember, I said this at the first thing I said in this hiring training was everything bad that happens in your business is because of your people. Everything good that happens in your business is because of your people. You got to make sure that you are setting them up for success in the best way possible. Now, going back to this though, always bring on 2 where you can. Now, if you physically can't bring on 2 because of volume, like for example, when I talk about volume, I mean if you're getting 60 calls a month, don't bring on 2 closers, right? Because that's 30 calls per month per closer, or in other words, 1 call per day per closer. That's just not enough volume. So just bring bring on 1. Now, you might currently not have enough volume, but if you don't have the ability to, which all of you do, because you're obviously all running ads and we're running your ads for you. So, if you want to bring on 2 closers, I highly recommend you do it and then just let us know and we can increase your spend and then double your volume. So now instead of having 60 calls a month, we could probably go to like 180 calls a month. Triple the ad spend, triple the volume or so. And then that way you're going to be able to then have 2 closers taking 90 calls per month each. Does that make sense? So you've got to give them enough volume. But if you can't, for whatever reason, maybe you can't have that much closer volume because you can't handle the client capacity, or vice versa, you can't bring on 2 account managers because you don't have enough client volume coming in, whatever it might be. If you can't bring 2 on because of the volume, then pick the top candidate and keep the others on the bench. And then if the one that you pick after 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the timeline, depending on the role, isn't a good fit, then you can, as I said before, go to the bench and bring the next person out. That's why you want to build up that bench. And again, the bench is referred to in the application training, where I show you that actual column in our hiring pipeline called the bench. And again, I keep referencing that one account manager who's now our top account manager. I pulled him from the bench. He didn't quote pass the first round because of his interview process and whatnot. Just wasn't that great. This was before I realized I was hiring based off the best interviewers, not the best candidates for the position itself. Anyway, I put him in the bench, brought him out as soon as we needed another account manager. He's ended up killing it. So that's basically it. Super simple. And again, the big thing here is most of the time by this point, it should be pretty clear. And ideally bring on two. I think more than that, unless you're really well-versed at ramping closers or ramping account, whatever the position is you're hiring for, unless you're really well versed at ramping them efficiently and you've got your ramping process dialed, I think any more than 2 can cause a lot of problems. So I always recommend try and keep it at about 2. But make sure you got the volume to facilitate 2 new hires for whatever the role is. So hopefully that makes sense. And that is how, from beginning to end, how we hire based on culture, based on outcomes and specific goals of the role, etc. And really ultimately how we find A players at the highest level in a scalable manner. So questions on this stuff, as always, hit us up. We're here to help. Anything you guys need, let me know. Help you out in any way possible. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next training. All right, so this is going to be the company onboarding training. Now, this is going to be independent of the role that you're hiring for. So every single new hire that you bring on board ought to go through the company onboarding. And then from there, they go into their role specific onboarding. So this is, again, whether it's somebody in your finance department, closer department, like sales department, like closers or setters, account managers, operations people, even VAs to a certain extent. Like if it's a VA that's not just a one-time kind of thing, if it's somebody that's going to be more of a longer-term VA, everyone should be going through your company onboarding. And the reason why is because the company onboarding should achieve 2 specific outcomes. Number one, it should enroll the new hire into your company, meaning all of your processes, all of your systems, all of the softwares that you use, etc. It's the stuff that you probably don't realize with your current team that you do on a daily basis. But then when you bring somebody new on board, you realize, oh damn, we got to get them access to this, get them access to that. Do they have an account here? Do they have an account there? Whatever it might be. The company onboarding should cover all of those things. And then also it should set clear expectations around your mission, your vision, and your values. Okay. And more specifically, it should really show what your culture is, because company culture is not created by what you say, rather it's created by what you do. And more specifically, culture refers to what happens when you're not there. This doesn't really tie into, honestly, the company onboarding, but I wanted to say this because I got this from Ben Horowitz, my favorite entrepreneur ever, in my opinion. Well, yeah, for me, favorite entrepreneur ever. He's a savage. And this was one of the most profound explanations of culture that I've ever heard. Is, again, more specifically, culture refers to what happens when you're not there. Because, if you're, for example, in a meeting, right? You're running a meeting, your team might do certain things because you're there, right? But that might not necessarily be what your true culture is. Whereas if someone on your, if a handful of team members have a meeting without you there, who are on your team, obviously, without you there, what happens in that meeting without you there and without the team thinking that you're going to rewatch it, right? If they just think, this is off the record, whatever, like, no one's watching us kind of thing. What then happens in that instance is what your culture is. That is what your culture is. They might be lazy, not do any work, whatever it might be. If that's the case, that's what your culture is. And this also ties into the idea that culture is something that you have no matter what. Values, you have no matter what. Standards, you have no matter what. It's not a question of do you have these things, it's a question of how good are these things? How high are your standards? Because you have standards. If your entire team is super lazy, they try and get off work early, they try and do the bare minimum to just get by. That is their standard. Like, their standard is do the bare minimum. Like, that is their standard, right? Meaning you have standards whether you like it or not. It's just how high are your standards. You have a culture whether you like it or not. It's just a question of, is that culture working for you or not? And so one of the reasons why you want to go so deep and specific in the on this type of stuff in the company onboarding, which in other words is the first thing that your new employee interacts with when they come on board, is because that should set the stage for how they then move forward in the company, and it should again set the standard, right? In terms of how you guys operate, etc. So there should never be any surprises when the new employee starts to join team calls or whatever it might be, or they just start to see the work environment. There should be no surprises at that point in the form of like, damn, you guys, this is way more full on than I thought, or you guys, care about this way more than I thought, or whatever. That shouldn't be surprising to them, because in your company onboarding, that should all be clearly stated, right? So your company onboarding should really set the stage for exactly what you're trying to achieve, why you do what you do, how you do what you do, and ultimately what you stand for as a company. That is what the company onboarding should focus on. And this is independent of the new hire's role. It doesn't matter. It's all about the company. And then from there, as I said before, the new employee then will go into their role specific. But this is all focused at the company level. So let's go into it. Setting expectations. So this is kind of before they start the company onboarding. Because before making any hire, you have to set the proper expectations of the role and what the reality of the role looks like. You would have seen this as a reoccurring theme during this week when it comes to recruiting. I'm a big proponent, a big fan of showing the reality of the position, or at least explaining the reality of the position before a new employee comes on board. Reason why is because if you fail to do this, your onboarding and ramping process will not work. We had in the early days a couple of people who went through this exact same onboarding and it just didn't work out. And it wasn't because the onboarding was bad, it was because I didn't set the right expectations on the front end. Now, the onboarding and ramp process should reinforce what you've already discussed with the candidate during the recruiting process. That's when your onboarding is gonna do really, really well when you follow this framework, when it reinforces what you've already spoken about in the recruiting process. So what you cover in your onboarding process should not shock the employee. It should shock them at how serious and how detailed you are. They should be like, oh, you weren't lying, right? Like, this is, you guys take this seriously. That could shock them, but the fundamental ideas themselves, as I say here, shouldn't shock them. So like one of the things with account managers in particular, we always stress like so hard in our recruiting process is our client experience, how much we communicate with clients, like how much we value client experience, because not a lot of agencies do. We do. And so every single time when in the recruitment process, we stress that, and then they come on board and they see that the first, we have which you'll see anyway, but we have like we call it an account manager university. The full first week, I think there's like 9 videos in the first week of the university. It's all focused on client communication, client experience. And so when they go through that, which is really more so the ramping process than it is the onboarding, but same concept applies, they're shocked at like how legit and serious and like strict I am on that side of things. But again, the fundamental idea of client experience, communication, etc., it reinforces it because I've already set the expectations clear on the front end. And so that's what you want to do here, right? So one thing you can do as well, just as like a tangible piece of advice, is you can use expectations as a way to, quote, lean out during the recruiting process. Now, you want to do this, sparingly, let's say, but it is something that you can do. So you could say something along the lines of, your day will be 90% client communication, and given that you're a wizard media buyer, I mean, why not just go and work somewhere where, you're behind the scenes all day doing really what it seems like you love, right? So you see how there I'm using the expectation of client communication as an example, as a way to lean out. Like, why don't you just go and do that? Sure, it'll be easier. And then you get them to resell you on like, no, but like, given what you guys do, the clients you work with, whatever, get them to resell you basically. This will allow you to onboard new employees properly without them, quote, opting out of the process, okay? So that's a bit of setup. Now let's get into the company playbook. So how we enroll any new employee is through 2 ways, right? We have company onboarding, right? Then you have role-specific onboarding. And both onboardings are facilitated by a playbook. I'll show you what this looks like. So the playbook for the company onboarding should cover, okay, universal software setup, such as Google Workspace, company email, Slack, Zoom, school content, or whatever your your centralized kind of company trainings are in. We have it on school, Gmail, Asana, Google Drive. Again, just the stuff that your team uses every day, but you don't really think about. Those things, if you don't, again, think about them and map them out and get it all set up prior to a new employee coming on, it can feel like a lot because, again, you use them every single day. You don't really think about adding new people to it. So then when you've got to think like, oh, we've got to add them to this and then, add them to that. It's a lot. So you just want to pre-map that out. Then the bigger thing really though, again, like we were saying about before, what in terms of what the company onboarding should cover is vision, mission, values. Okay. Really clearly stating that out. And I recommend you put this onto a Google Doc, like write it out. I'll show you ours here in a minute, but write this out and then create a video or a training around you explaining and going through your vision, mission, and your values. We have like it's between 35 and 45 minute video of me basically explaining just our vision, our mission, our values, nothing else, right? What your company does and slash what you do, this should say, slash what you do, who you serve. So who's your ideal client? What is there any specifics about them? Are they oftentimes very emotional? You got to, kind of just be very clear about who you serve, how they operate, etc. What you sell and how you help your market. So how do you actually, with your market, like obviously naturally every market's going to have their pre-existing desires and whatever else. How do you help them achieve those things? Product and avatar education, and then also client onboarding. So this is extremely important for us as a company. So I have a whole section just on client onboarding in our company onboarding playbook, if that makes sense. Again, think back to setting expectations. So if you go through something in your company onboarding, which is again the first interaction that any new employee has, that's going to set their expectation and make them realize from day one, this is really important to us, hence why you're going through it on the onboarding. And client onboarding is really important for us, right? And then also, I really like the idea of just putting a bunch of client results, showing a bunch of client testimonials, again, in your company onboarding, independent of the role that they're joining, because obviously one of the things you guys should value as a company is client results. And so again, showing that on day one sets the expectation. Now, selling them on your vision, getting them bought in is really the biggest focus here, to be honest. And again, this should reinforce what you've already touched on in the recruiting process. So let me show you ours for reference. So again, thinking back to what I said before, this is basically a playbook, right? It's just on a Google Doc, really. But you send this playbook to them, and then you have everything linked onto this playbook. Now, obviously, there's a lot, right? But if they have just one centralized place, which is, again, the playbook, and then everything's facilitated through this playbook, it just makes it a lot easier for the new hire, for them to make sure, though, that they actually cover everything that's required. It also makes it easier for you as well to, again, facilitate the company onboarding process. So with us, company specific software setup. We have all these things, and our real one, we have like a little, it's like a 1 minute video, honestly, just going through how to set up Slack, Zoom, etc. And then we also have obviously our company university. So this is basically essentially what I mentioned here in terms of vision, mission, values, etc. Why your company does what sorry, this needs to be changed. Yeah, this was right before I messed up on that. Why your company does what you do. This, for us, I did this in training format. So in other words, I just created like a mini company university. So why we do what we do is just as important as how we do what we do. If you're not in alignment / bought into the why behind everything we do at scoreclients.io, then you are not a good fit to be on this team, right? So I'm setting expectations clear on day one. Why we do what we do is just as important as how we do it. So here is basically all the reasons why we do what we do. Now, I'm leaning out always, right? If you don't align with this, it's totally fine. Just let me know. We can part ways as friends. I probably say that about 15 times during our company onboarding and role specific onboarding process, simply because I really want to make it clear, like if you're not aligned with this, it's totally fine. Let me know. We can part ways as friends, because it's not going to work out unless you're fully bought in, right? So we have, I can show you it here. It's in school. You can have your own version. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but with ours, we have, so welcome to scoreclients.io, just basically a basic introduction into the company, how to win in your first 7 days. So this goes back to the idea of like, how can you set up your team for success? Well, a lot of the times, new hires, new employees don't actually know what their employer wants from them. What do they want to see from them? How can they win? What do they need to do, etc. I just tell the team, like, here's exactly how you can win in your first 7 days. If you do this, you do this, you do this. I go through a bunch, right? Here's exactly how to win. And then they know what they need to do. So then it's a lot easier for the new employee to actually perform well. Not only does that benefit the company, because then they're actually doing more of the actions required for them to actually be successful, so we win, but also it makes it easier for the employee because they know what they need to do, right? Or in other words, they feel as though we're pouring into them to set them up for success, right? Also, then we go into the story and the vision. So that ties into the mission, vision, values. This is the vision aspect, where we're going, why we're going there. And then the company mission and the purpose, right? Then we have company values. So this is basically, if you think about it, the values are how the team should be interacting with each other on a daily basis when we're on our way to our vision. Does that make sense? And then we have the team org chart, so like how the company's structured, and how all the different departments work together and who's in the departments, etc. Again, just really allowing the new employee to be familiar with, again, how we're structured as a company. Our clients, so this speaks to obviously who we work with, what our clients are, what companies they run, what problems they have, all of that type of stuff. And then finally, we go through our philosophy on scaling, because obviously we help scale our clients' companies. And so everyone at the company needs to understand our philosophy, obviously, on scaling. So that's what we, back into the playbook here. That's what we have here. So again, when a new employee comes on board, this is what they go through first, right? Then we go through a little bit more just like written content about, like, again, what we do, who we serve, what we sell, product and avatar education. And then finally, we go through the client onboarding. And then we have client results and testimonials, right? So bottom line, I can't give you this directly so you can just basically copy it, simply because obviously there's too much private information. I'll give you everything that I can, but this I can't give you because, again, there's too much private information on it. However, what I will say is that you want to basically mirror what I've got here for your own company. And also, even if I gave you this is so tailored to us that it's not even going to make sense for you anyway. So you just got to, again, what's your story and vision, right? Like, what's your company mission and purpose, etc., right? So create this for yourself. If you need help on it, by the way, just head up your account manager. We can help you with it, but we just can't give you ours because, again, there's a lot of personal information on there. So that's the company onboarding, though. So you can see how all of those things on here, they're all tailored to just the company, and I don't talk about any roles in there, right? It's like the company's story and the vision, how to win in the company, the total company organization charts, etc. It's all independent of the role, because then you go into the role specific onboarding, which is the second onboarding process, if you want to call it that. And this is more particular for what obviously the role is that the client was, that the candidate was hired for, right? And so what's covered here is basically the scorecard, role specific softwares, and training content for the role, which is essentially similar to client training. However, with this, we're going to cover the role specific in the role specific weeks of like the sales week and the fulfillment week. I'll cover the role specific onboarding in there. So, well, I've got our company playbook here for reference. There you go, which is what we just basically went through. Now, just so you know, because I understand this is probably a little bit confusing, like there's a lot of docs here and there's a lot of like, if they go through this and then they go through that and then they come back to here or whatever else. So let me just give you a bird's eye level view of the onboarding process overall, just so you're hopefully a little bit clearer. Okay, so this is pretty basic, honestly, from a bird's eye level view. So you go through the recruitment process, the candidate accepts the offer, right? Then the department head initiates the new employee onboarding process. Now that process is going to be in the next video. It's basically, again, a way to facilitate what I was just going through there in terms of setting up new, hires on, softwares and whatever else. That should be done by the department head. But again, that'll be in the next video. I'll show you kind of the process behind that. But basically, in so many words, the department head initiates onboarding for the new employee. The new employee then goes through the company onboarding playbook. I should have wrote that in here, to be honest. Company onboarding. Okay, company onboarding playbook, which is essentially what I just went through here. So they literally, how they go through this is they start at the top, okay? Get access to this, great. Then they go through company university. Then they go through and read through this, get familiar with, what we do, who we serve. Then they go through this, then they go through this, then they go through this. And then once they're done, they're done. Then from there, they then move on to the next one, which is the role-specific onboarding, which again, we're gonna go through in the particular fulfillment weeks, or the fulfillment and the sales weeks. I'll show you how all of that's mapped out, but then they go through that one. And then again, it's a similar playbook, just more tailored to the role as opposed to the overall company. So then they just go through the role specific playbook and they just go through every step. Okay, step one, this is step two, this is step three. They just go through it and complete it, right? And then from there, they go into the ramp process. So you have onboarding and ramp. Onboarding is basically just getting into the role, understanding the role, etc. Then the ramp process is basically then taking that new hire from day one or, call it zero, to KPI in the role. What does KPI in the role look like? Well, KPI is basically the scorecard. All the outcomes that you remember we listed on the scorecard, that's essentially KPI, right? Because the scorecard is you got to achieve this or you're not a good fit on the team, right? This is what this role has got to produce. And so that by extension becomes KPI. So then that delta between day one and hitting the outcomes on the scorecard, that's the ramp process. And obviously the idea is we want to decrease that time as much as possible, because the longer that takes, the slower they're going to ramp up, and ultimately it means the slower you're going to scale essentially. So that is the ramp process. And again, all of that's broken down in terms of how to ramp new closers, setters, etc., and then how to ramp new account managers. I break that down in the role specific weeks. And then at that point, you then have somebody who you can look at and go, yes, this person's a great fit, or they're just not working out, they're not ramping quick enough, I made a wrong decision, whatever. So then at that point, it becomes a fire or keep situation. If you fire them, you move them out. If you keep them, they stay on board, and then they just go onto their normal management cadence, which again, the management side of things is a totally different concept, which we go through in the role specific week. So hopefully that's a little clearer in terms of that process, because I know there's a lot here, so it might feel like a little confusing, but this is basically all it is. And I think once you go through the next training, which is going to be the new employee onboarding process that is initiated again by the department head, I think from that one, because that's a little bit more step by step, it'll be a lot more clearer. So that's everything for this one. Any questions on this, as always, let us know. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next training. All right, so this is going to be a quick run through of basically the department head SOP, whatever you want to call it, whenever a new employee on board. So right now, if you obviously it's just you, and maybe you've got a couple of account managers, a couple of closers, you're kind of running the account manager team, you're running the sales team. This would be you that would do this. However, when you get to the point where you have, a client success director, you have a sales manager, etc., you have somebody, head of finance, you have head of whatever other departments you've got, they would execute this SOP, just for context. All right, so again, this is going to kind of tie in to the previous video, because this is just basically a way to facilitate the onboarding processes. So somebody comes on board, okay, great. The department head will then send the company playbook, which we went through in the previous training, and I've just got it basically linked here in Asana. You could create something similar in Asana or whatever project management software you use. But again, more so what I'm showing you here is just the process. So send over that playbook. Also, you want to send the role specific playbook. And then we have each one of them listed here. And then we have like a general pre-onboarding quote checklist, if you want to call it that, again, that is executed by the department head. So first things first, they need to update the organization with the new employee name on the the org chart. Update that with the new employee name, show how they fit into the overarching organization. Then you also want to send a kickoff email. Here's a template that so this is a template. As an example, with an account manager, hey Aaron, it's a pleasure to have you on the team. As we've mentioned a handful of times already, we're not only very particular about who we bring on board, but more importantly, we always ensure that whoever we choose, we feel as though we can provide them with the goals they are wanting to achieve. I truly feel as though ScaleClients.io can help you achieve the goals we've spoken about, and I'm super excited to be on that journey with you. In terms of next steps, please review and sign the contract, which would have been sent in a separate email, check spam, etc. Please also fill out the team survey covering a handful of personal questions here. And finally, please see an updated organizational chart here showing where you fit into the organization. Once you've done the above steps, please start with your onboarding process here. You will have received an invitation to join Slack, invite sent via email. Any questions, let me know. So essentially, if we go back to here, so remember I said, obviously update organization chart with the new employee name. That's what you would link here. Again, so you can show where this new employee fits into the overarching organization. That's super key on like day one of them being on board, I also say here to send contracts. So you would want to obviously send this email and then also send the contracts as well, which is again referenced here, like, check, it'll be in a separate email, whatever. So you send, and then obviously collect the contracts, so make sure that they sign it and whatnot. Create a new company email. Okay, create all of their accounts for their software using the company email. So you always want to create the company email first. And then if you think back to, the company playbook, all the softwares and even the role specific softwares as well, which again, you'll see in the role specific onboarding training, which will be later on, the department head wants to add them to all of those required softwares, right? With their company email, their new company email that you created for them. They also need to add their birthday and company anniversary into the calendar. So if I actually let me show you this here. So one of the things I said before, right? Please also fill out the team survey covering a handful of personal questions. So this is basically, sorry, I don't know what's happening there. All right, so this is what we have new employees fill out. Name, address. So this is so we can send them, send the team gifts and whatever else. So we got it on file. Birthday. So when they fill this out, that's when we want to then add the birthday to the calendar. So we know every year that, it's XYZ's birthday. So we can celebrate it as a team. What are your 3 favorite restaurants? Do you have children, boys, girls? We want to know this like personal information. So again, we can send them better gifts. We can, if they've, got children, they've got a child on the way, just so you can kind of, the team a little bit more personally and intimately. I've just found this is the best way to get that type of information. And then also obviously on one-on-ones as well, you dive deeper into this as well. What are your favorite hobbies? What do you do when you're not working? Don't say I always work, right? And then that's it, okay? So that's that. Company anniversary is obviously today's date. If today's their first day, on the team, you'd want to add in, the 8th of whatever the month is. That's the company anniversary, super simple. Make Slack posts welcoming the new member. So this will be done in the company. How we run things is we have like a team channel, company-wide channel. Everyone in the company is in one channel on Slack. And then we also have obviously department-specific channels. We have like sales team channel, fulfillment channel, etc. So you want to make sure that you welcome them to both the company as well as the team or the department-specific channel as well. And then you want to send the onboarding funnel depending on their position on Slack as well. So that's really just, sending these 2 over. And then, this is also important. You want the department to send a testimonial like voice note intro. So when I just found this works really, really well to make them feel as though the new hires made the right decision. Exactly the same as when a client comes on board. You know how you want to like hype up the client, make them feel like they've made the right decision, decrease buyer's remorse, etc. Same idea with a new employee. Again, this goes back to this, the idea of talent acquisition, same thing as client acquisition. When a new employee comes on board, you want the rest of the team, obviously, you don't want it to sound scripted, right? Everyone's saying the same thing, but if the rest of the department can kind of give a bit of, obviously intro themselves, give a bit of feedback on their personal situation and, who they are, what they do, what they like, are they married, kids, whatever. But then also, if you can get them to say, when I first joined Scale Clients or the company, when I first joined company, I was somebody who was very insecure. I was somebody who was very, just not overly confident in what I was doing. I also didn't really know that much. And, back then, just being transparent with you, I wasn't making the money I was wanting to make, whatever. And now I've been here for 9 months. I've been here for 2 years. I've been here for 3 years, 1 month, whatever it is. Now, after being here for, 12 months, I'm just so much more confident. I'm so much this, I'm that. I'm making the money that I want. I'm finally achieving my dreams. And so, dude, overall, you've made the best decision to come on board. I'm extremely excited to have you on the team, whatever, right? So you can see how that's kind of like a testimonial-like voice note from people on the current team, which is going to reinforce the new hire's decision that they've made the right choice coming onto this team. It's kind of just going to set them up for success a little bit more. That's all that refers to. And so that's really what should all be initiated by the department head. And you can obviously see how these company playbooks that I was speaking about in the company onboarding, and I will speak about in the role-specific onboarding trainings, that's how these are used, right? You send them over to them. And this is really, as I say here, weeks 1 and 2 of a new employee being on board. What they need to be focused on primarily is the company, is to complete the company onboarding, right? And then also complete the role-specific onboarding. That should really be their only 2 focuses. Why? Because everything that's required should be in those 2 playbooks. That's it. This is why this process just works so well. And also this is, by the way, a really scalable onboarding and ramp system that at least works for us. So not only that, they need to focus on completing the company and role-specific onboarding playbooks, but then also they need to be joining the daily team call that is, their department-specific daily team call. So they need to have 3 one-on-ones per week with the department head. Now, those one-on-ones is more so just how you go in, questions, how can I help? Are you feeling good? Like any questions, primarily, again, it's going to be associated to the onboarding playbooks because obviously, there's a lot in there. But that's really what those are, just check-ins, getting in sync, etc. And then finally, from there, after weeks 1 and 2, then obviously you just follow the ramp process, and that's going to be different for every department. But again, in the ramp process, in the weeks where we go through the role-specific ramping processes, there's a cadence of calls and there's, to-dos and all that type of stuff in there. So that's when you would just follow the ramp process. And at that point, after like weeks, really, I would say the first week is when the onboarding should be complete. And then that's when we start the ramp process, which is why you would then follow that after weeks 1/2. So hopefully this makes sense. Again, this should be all initiated by your department head. If you're that right now, that it's you. If you've got managers though, the managers should be doing this. So hopefully that kind of clears up a little bit more about the cadence and sequence of onboarding. And as always, any questions on this stuff, just let us know. We're here to help, and I'll see you in the next training.